Hello everyone and welcome back to the Unexplained Diaries. Here on this channel I share real-life encounters with beings from beyond the skies to help you unwind and drift off to sleep. Before we dive in, I would love to hear from you. Leave a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. Now, find a comfortable spot, relax, and let's begin. It was the second week of November, cold but not freezing yet. I went up to my uncle's cabin alone, near the border of Michigan's Upper Peninsula. He let me use it every fall for deer season. Pretty isolated, no cell service, just a wood stove and a battery radio. Closest neighbors a mile out, and I liked it that way. I got in late Friday afternoon and spent the night chopping kindling and setting up my gear. Nothing out of the ordinary. There were tracks along the tree line, deer, raccoons, a few squirrel holes, the usual signs. Saturday morning, I set out before dawn. There's a ridge a little over a mile from the cabin that overlooks a small valley with good coverage. That's where I usually post up. Took my usual route through thick brush and around a frozen pond that cuts across the trail. Sun was just barely up by the time I got settled, and that's when I noticed how quiet it was. It didn't register at first. I thought maybe it was just the cold. Sometimes the birds stay low in the mornings, but even as the sun got higher, the woods stayed completely still. No rustling, no bird calls, not even squirrels. Just this weird flat silence. It didn't feel peaceful. It felt wrong. I stayed still for maybe an hour, just listening. No movement in the valley, no wind. I even started clicking my tongue a little, just to break it up, because the silence was getting in my head. Eventually, I started walking. I figured maybe the deer had moved higher up the ridge, so I followed an old trail north toward a stream bed that usually has some traffic. That's when I realized I hadn't seen a single animal. Not just deer. Nothing. No birds flying overhead. No rabbit prints in the snow. Not even bugs. The snow was clean, undisturbed. I stopped and took off my gloves to rub my ears. Sometimes I get this weird pressure in my head when the air's too dry, and I thought maybe that was messing with my hearing. But everything sounded normal, or would have, if there was anything to hear. Then I started noticing this low vibration. Not a noise, exactly, more like a feeling. It started in my chest. Just a faint, steady hum, like standing next to a transformer. I looked around thinking maybe there was logging equipment nearby, but I hadn't heard a chainsaw all morning. No engines. Nothing man-made. The sound, or vibration, whatever it was, got stronger the deeper I went. I stood there for a bit trying to pinpoint a direction, but it felt like it was coming from above me. I craned my neck and stared up through the trees. Nothing but canopy and sky. But the hum didn't stop. If anything, it got deeper. Not louder, just lower. Like the tone shifted. I could feel it behind my eyes. Made me a little nauseous, honestly. I started heading back. I wasn't panicking yet, but I didn't like how off everything felt. I kept looking around, expecting to see something, anything that explained it. But the woods looked normal. Just empty. I walked faster. About 10 minutes in, I passed the pond again, and that's when I saw something weird. The surface was rippling. Now, this pond was mostly frozen, just a thin layer, but enough that you'd hear it crack if something moved on it. But the ripples were dead center, in a perfect ring, like something had dropped in. No splash, no sound. Just spreading circles. I crouched down behind a stump and watched. The ring spread out, then stopped. No birds in the trees. No wind. That low hum was still going. I waited another minute, then slowly moved past the pond, staying low. I kept glancing up. Still nothing in the sky, but the hum was definitely above me. By the time I made it back to the cabin, it was after 11. I dumped my gear and went out to the clearing behind the woodshed, where the trees open up a bit. Figured maybe I'd spot a plane or something. The sky was clear, pale blue, not a cloud. But the second I stepped into the clearing, the hum stopped. Not faded, stopped, like someone flipped a switch, and with it came the sound of the woods again. Wind in the branches, a few dry leaves skittering across the snow, but still no animals, not a single bird. I stayed at the cabin the rest of the day. Didn't go out again until dusk, just stood on the porch with my rifle slung and tried to calm down. Told myself maybe I was coming down with something. Inner ear issue, migraine, something that could mess with your senses. That night, I kept the fire going and tried to sleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up feeling this pressure in my chest again, same as before. Low, steady vibration, like someone had dropped a subwoofer under the floorboards. I got up and stepped outside. The woods were dead quiet again. And the hum was back. I turned off the porch light, just stood there in the dark in my boots and long johns, squinting up through the trees. There were no stars. That's what finally made my stomach drop. No stars at all. Normally you can see everything out there. Orion, the Big Dipper, all of it. But the sky was just black. Like something massive was hanging over the forest, blotting everything out. I didn't see any shape, no lights, nothing moving. Just a solid dark above the tree line, darker than the rest of the sky. I backed up into the cabin and locked the door. The hum lasted another hour. I sat in the kitchen with the stove burning and the rifle across my knees, just listening. No footsteps, no knocks, nothing outside. But the pressure didn't go away until almost 4. When it stopped, it was like the air sighed. That's the best way I can put it. Not a sound, just this shift, like something had released. Next morning, the birds were back. I heard them before I opened the door. Crows, mostly. Some chickadees. There were fresh rabbit prints by the porch. The pond was frozen solid again. Everything looked normal. I packed up and left that afternoon. Didn't even wait for the weekend to finish. Drove straight back to town and didn't say a word to anyone. A couple weeks later, I checked the local DNR reports online. Just out of curiosity. No mention of anything strange. No missing hunters. No seismic activity, not even unusual weather, but I haven't been back to that cabin since. And sometimes, late at night, I get that feeling in my chest again, like something heavy's watching from above. I didn't notice it right away. The radar logs were just something I started digging through out of boredom after I retired. I'd spent 30 years in air traffic control, mostly military, and I liked the routine of scanning data. Something about watching patterns and spotting mistakes gave me a sense of purpose, even if no one else cared. After I left the tower for good, I got access to some old, archived radar sweeps from my last few years, just for personal interest, not for anything official. The files weren't classified or anything, just boring maintenance backups most people never look at. I loaded them onto a little program I had on my home computer that lets you scrub through time and watch aircraft movement frame by frame. Most of it's commercial traffic, some military training flights, and a whole lot of nothing. One night, I was going through a set from March 2019. This would have been about 3 weeks before I turned in my badge. I was filtering for anomalies, the unidentified transponders, unusual altitudes, that sort of thing. Around 0200Z, that's 9 p.m. local time, I spotted a ping that didn't make any sense. It showed up at 42,000 feet, doing nearly 1,100 knots. At first, I thought it was a glitch. The returns weren't clean, only a few sweeps picked it up, but it was consistent enough to trace. It appeared northeast of the station, moving southwest, stopped. Not slowed down, stopped. Just held position at that altitude for 4 sweeps, then reversed course. Exactly reversed. Same vector, opposite direction, same speed. No banking, no arc, no turning radius, like it pivoted in midair. That's not something an aircraft can do. Not at that speed, not at that height. Even drones don't behave that way, not unless they're close to the ground and moving slow. I zoomed in on the timestamp and coordinates. When I mapped it out, the ping had passed almost directly over my property. I live in a rural area about 30 minutes from base. No neighbors within a quarter mile, just pine and open field. At first, I figured I must have made a mistake, got the coordinates wrong, or misread the scale. But I double-checked. It was right above my house. That night, back in 2019, I was home. I remember it clearly because we'd lost power for a couple hours around 8:30. Just a localized outage, maybe weather-related, even though the sky had been clear. I'd lit a few candles and sat on the porch. No phone, no TV, just quiet. I remember hearing a low humming sound that didn't seem to come from any direction. I assumed it was a generator from one of the farms across the hills, but it had a weird vibration to it, like it was in my ears instead of outside. It lasted maybe 10 minutes. Then the power flickered back on and the hum stopped. I didn't think much of it at the time, but when I saw that radar return, same date, same time frame, it lined up almost exactly. I pulled up additional sweeps from the surrounding stations, thinking maybe I could triangulate or catch another return. There was nothing. Whatever it was, only my station picked it up. Which was strange, because normally if something's flying that fast at that altitude, it'll light up multiple arrays. I thought maybe it was a local bug in the system. So I checked other nights, looked through logs going back 3 months before and 3 after, nothing similar, no other unexplained returns like that one, just that single event that one night. I printed out the log, 6 returns total, 2 on approach, 2 holding still, 2 departing, all within less than a minute. I sat with that for a while. Didn't tell anyone. I knew what people would say, and honestly, I didn't even know what I was looking at. A few nights later, I went outside around the same time just to see if I'd notice anything. I didn't expect to. It was cold, sky was clear, quiet again. Around 9:15, the dogs across the field started barking. I don't have a dog, but the neighbor about half a mile down does, and I can usually hear it faintly when it's riled up. This time it sounded wrong, panicked, not aggressive. Then it just stopped, like someone had cut the sound mid-yelp. Right after that, the humming came back. Same tone, same feeling, more in my head than in my ears. I stood still, trying to find the source, but there was nothing. No lights in the sky, no movement, just the hum. Then my porch light flickered and went out. The house behind me went completely dark too. No breakers tripped, just dark. I turned and looked up. Still nothing visible, but something felt wrong. Like I was being watched, but not from the woods. More like from above. It lasted maybe 5 minutes. Then the light came back on, hum stopped, and everything felt normal again. But the air smelled faintly metallic, like ozone or scorched wires. I went back inside and checked the weather logs, thinking maybe there was some kind of static buildup or high-altitude lightning. Nothing. Conditions were stable, no wind, no fronts. Out of curiosity, I put a cheap portable weather station on the roof the next day. Just one of those basic ones with pressure, temp, and magnetic field sensors. 2 nights later, same time, same hum. Lasted less than a minute that time. But the station spiked. Magnetic field jumped about 40 microteslas for 12 seconds, then dropped back. That's not normal. Not around here. And there were no geomagnetic storms reported that week. I started documenting everything. Dates, times, duration. The events weren't daily, more like once every 4 or 5 nights. Always around the same time window. 9:05 to 9:20. Always brief. Always followed by either a power flicker or a dog barking or some kind of low-frequency hum. I told a guy I used to work with. He brushed it off, said it was probably an electrical fault or maybe a nearby transformer messing with the grid. But none of this showed up in the utility reports. After about a month, I stopped noticing the hum. Or maybe it stopped happening. Either way, nothing strange happened for a while. The radar logs after that night stayed clean. No more odd returns. Then, one afternoon, I was checking the solar panels on my roof and noticed a patch of scorched shingle right above the master bedroom. Round, about a foot across. No sign of impact. No charring around the edges. Just the top layer of material blistered like it had been flash heated. There'd been no storms, no downed lines. I couldn't explain it. I didn't climb up there again. Eventually, I stopped checking the radar logs. It started to feel obsessive, and I wasn't finding anything new, but I saved that one printout, the anomaly. It's still in my desk drawer. Sometimes I wake up around 9:10 for no reason and just lie there listening. And every so often the porch light flickers. Just once. Never long enough to mean anything. We were driving back from my cousin's place in New Hampshire, heading south through Vermont. I remember it was late, close to midnight, and we were trying to make it back to Massachusetts without stopping for the night. My girlfriend, Mel, was dozing off in the passenger seat. I was driving, sipping what was left of a gas station coffee, and watching the GPS reroute because we missed a turn somewhere near Route 103. It was a 2-lane road, no traffic, just trees and fields on either side. No houses for miles, no streetlights. It was dead quiet except for the tires on the pavement and whatever song was half playing on the radio. The air felt heavy, kind of humid, even though it was mid-October. Somewhere near Shrewsbury, the engine started acting up. Not stalling, just this weird jerking when I hit the gas. like it wasn't shifting right. I figured we might have picked up some bad gas, or maybe the transmission was slipping. I didn't want to push it, so I pulled over onto a little gravel turnout near a break in the trees. Mel woke up when we stopped and asked if everything was okay. I told her I just wanted to check the engine, make sure nothing was leaking. She stayed in the car while I popped the hood and looked around with my phone light. I don't know much about engines, but nothing looked wrong. No smoke, no weird smells. I wiggled a couple hoses like I knew what I was doing and closed the hood. That's when I noticed a light behind us on the road. It wasn't there a minute earlier. It looked like a car with its high beams on, maybe a quarter-mile back. But it wasn't moving, just sitting there. No engine sound. I figured it was someone else pulling over, maybe checking a map or texting. We got back on the road and the car seemed okay again. No jerking. I didn't think much of it until a few minutes later when I looked in the mirror and saw the same light again. Same brightness, same distance. Still not gaining on us, still not falling behind. I slowed down to see if it would catch up. It didn't. I sped up a bit and it stayed exactly the same distance. Just this steady, bright white light low to the road, like headlights but too clean somehow, too sharp. No color, no flare. Mel noticed it too after a while. She turned in her seat and asked, "Is that the same car?" I said I thought it was, but I wasn't sure. We kept driving. The road curved, dipped, came back up through some trees, and the light stayed exactly where it was, like it was attached to us. We passed a small green sign that said, Danby Four Corners, 6 miles. I remember that because it was the first sign we'd seen in a while. That stretch of road didn't have any shoulder lights or reflectors, so the fact that the light behind us stayed so consistent felt off. Off. I decided to pull over again, partly because I wanted to see if it would stop too. This time, I eased off onto a wider shoulder near a driveway gate. Just a dirt path, really. I killed the engine and turned off the lights. The air was completely still. No wind, no crickets. Just the ping of the engine cooling and the sound of my own heartbeat picking up. The light behind us kept coming, but slower. Not like a car driving, more like it was gliding. I couldn't hear any tires or engine. It moved a little closer, maybe cutting the distance in half, and then just stopped. Still one bright white light, centered. Not two like normal headlights. It didn't illuminate the trees or cast shadows. It was just there. Mel rolled her window down and leaned out. "Hello?" she called. Nothing. No movement. I was about to get out again when the light blinked off. Gone. Just like that. Total darkness. We sat there for a long minute, both of us staring at the spot where it had been. I turned the key in the ignition. The car started, but the radio didn't. The screen lit up, but there was no sound. The volume knob didn't do anything. I tapped the screen. Nothing. It wasn't frozen, just blank. I threw it in drive and got back on the road. I didn't even look in the mirror for a while. We drove another 10 minutes without saying anything. Just silence. No cars in either direction. No towns, no lights. I was gripping the wheel too hard, just watching the lines pass under the headlights. Then Mel said, "It's back." I looked. The same light, same distance, never left. No bumps, no glare, just smooth white glow. That time I didn't stop. I kept going, watching it in the mirror, waiting for it to gain or fade or swerve or do something. It didn't. At one point, I thought I saw it blink again, just a single flicker. But when I looked back, it was right where it had been, like it hadn't moved at all. Eventually, we hit a small town. I don't remember the name, but it had a gas station and a laundromat, and one of those pizza places that also sells subs and fried dough. As soon as we passed the first street light, the light behind us vanished. Not gradually, just gone, like it had never been there. We pulled into the gas station and parked under the bright canopy lights. I got out and looked back down the road. Nothing but empty highway and trees. I checked the back of the car, like maybe someone had stuck something on the bumper, some kind of reflector or light sensor. There was nothing. No magnets, no scratches. The license plate light was working fine. Everything looked normal. Inside the gas station, the cashier didn't seem surprised when I asked if the area had weird signal issues. He just said sometimes and kept reading his magazine. I asked if they had security cameras that faced the road. He said no. I grabbed a bottle of water and stood near the window for a bit, watching the highway. It stayed dark. We didn't see the light again after that. The rest of the drive was uneventful. We got home a little before 3 a.m. The next day, I checked the car over in daylight. No damage, no interference on the radio anymore. Everything worked normally. I went under the car too, nothing out of place. No wires, no tags, no tracking devices. I checked our phones, just out of curiosity. Mine had a weird gap in location data that night. From 12:21 to 12:44, nothing recorded, like we didn't move. Mel's phone had the same gap. Both of us had location services on, and neither phone had restarted or lost power. The timestamps jumped from one side of Danby to the other, with no path between. We weren't stopped during that time. We were definitely driving. I even looked at satellite maps later to try and figure out exactly where we were when the light appeared. But honestly, those roads all look the same out there. Trees, fields, curves. It's easy to lose track of time when there's nothing around you. Every now and then I think about pulling the dashcam footage from that night, but I never got around to checking if it was recording. I haven't driven that route again. If we go north now, we stick to the main highways. I don't care if it takes longer. I woke up because the house felt off, like something was different, but I couldn't put my finger on it. It was around 6 a.m., just before sunrise, and the usual hum of the heater wasn't there. Instead, everything was quiet, too quiet. When I got out of bed, I noticed this weird light coming through the curtains. It wasn't the normal soft glow of early morning. It had a strange shimmer to it, like the air was sparkling. I rubbed my eyes and opened the curtains. The entire front yard was covered in this fine silver dust. It wasn't dirt or pollen. It looked almost like tiny flakes of metal dust, shimmering faintly in the pale light. The grass, the porch, even the cars in the driveway had this layer of it. I thought maybe it was from some kind of construction or farming nearby. There was a field a few miles away, and sometimes they used crop dusters. But this dust was everywhere, on the windows, the porch railing, the mailbox. It looked like someone had sprayed the whole neighborhood with a fine metallic powder overnight. I woke up my wife to show her, but she just blinked at me, half asleep. Our 2 kids were still asleep, so I told her I'd check the rest of the house. I walked down the hallway toward the kitchen and noticed all the electronics were blinking 12. The microwave, the clock on the stove, even the digital thermostat. That usually only happens when the power goes out and then comes back on, but I hadn't heard any thunder or seen any outage on the news. I grabbed my phone to check the time. The screen was on, but it was completely blank, no signal, no battery drain, like it had been off for hours. I tried turning it on several times, but nothing. The same with my wife's phone and the kids' tablets. All dead or unresponsive. I thought maybe the power was out, but the fridge was running, the lights in the hallway came on when I flipped the switch, and the water heater was making its usual noises. It was like the electricity was functioning, but something had reset all the clocks and killed all the smaller electronics. I opened the back door to check the backyard. Same silver dust everywhere, on the patio furniture, the swing set, the garden tools. The air smelled faintly metallic, but otherwise clean. I didn't hear any birds or insects, which was strange for that time of morning. Normally, there'd be some chirping, some wind, anything. I decided to call the power company, but my phone still wouldn't turn on. I tried the landline, no dial tone. The cable box was dead too. It was like all the devices that relied on a clock or connection had been wiped out or reset, but the main power lines and appliances worked fine. By then, my wife was fully awake and looking around, puzzled. We checked the news on TV, but it wouldn't start up. The satellite receiver was blinking 12, just like the other devices. We tried the radio, dead silence. The kids came down soon after, and I told them to stay inside. We all wore our shoes because the dust covered everything, and I didn't want to track it all over the house. The weird part was how evenly it was spread. No clumps or piles, just a smooth, fine layer like someone sprayed it on. I tried to take some pictures on my phone, but again, nothing. The camera app wouldn't open. Eventually, I grabbed my old point-and-shoot camera from a drawer. It worked, but when I looked at the photos later on the computer, the dust barely showed up. It was like the camera couldn't capture the shimmer. Around 8 a.m., I decided to walk to the end of the block to see if neighbors had noticed anything. Everyone's houses looked the same, covered in this silver dust, electronics blinking 12, and no one outside. The neighborhood was eerily silent, no kids playing, no dogs barking. I knocked on a few doors. Some lights flickered on inside, but no one answered. One neighbor's car was still in the driveway, but the door was open and the interior lights were off. It looked like they left in a hurry or just disappeared. I went back home and called my wife over. She noticed something else. Her watch had stopped at exactly 3:17 a.m. The minute hand was frozen and the digital display was blank. My watch, too, was frozen, but at 3:19 a.m. The kids' watches were also stopped between 3:15 and 3:20. We started to wonder if something had happened around 3 a.m. We didn't hear anything during the night, no sirens, no helicopters, no alarms. The street cameras wouldn't turn on, and even my security system was offline, showing the same frozen time. I checked my calendar and phone for any reminders or alerts around that time, but everything was blank. It felt like those few minutes just vanished, like time had paused or reset for a bit. By midday, the dust was still everywhere, but we started noticing subtle things that didn't make sense. Our dog, normally energetic and barking at squirrels, was lethargic and stared out the window for long stretches without moving. The cat hid under the couch and wouldn't come out. The sky was cloudy but otherwise normal. No strange lights or sounds. The air didn't feel windy, yet leaves on trees had a slight shimmer, almost like they were coated in the same dust. We stayed mostly inside, trying to make sense of what was going on. The phones still didn't work, the clocks all blinked or were frozen, and the TV remained silent. No news, no emergency alerts. That evening, power was steady, but the strange effects on the electronics continued. My laptop powered on, but wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi. The router's lights blinked oddly, like a slow pulse rather than the usual steady glow. We tried to brush the dust off the porch and cars, but it came right back, like static cling or some kind of residue that wouldn't wash away easily. The next morning, things started changing again. The dust was thinning, like a light rain had washed some of it off overnight. The clocks slowly reset themselves, all finally showing the correct time around 5:30 a.m. The phones powered back on and connected to the network, but there was no signal for calls or texts. Internet was spotty at best. By afternoon, the neighborhood was back to normal on the surface. Birds returned, kids played outside, and neighbors started talking again. But something felt off. No one wanted to say it out loud, but all of us who saw that dust and experienced those frozen clocks noticed a strange emptiness in the air. Like whatever was there watching disappeared just as suddenly as it arrived. Later, I went through the photos I managed to take with the old camera. Most looked normal except one, an image of the backyard taken through the kitchen window at dawn. In the center of the frame, behind the swing set, there was a faint shape. Not a shadow, but a sort of blurry outline. It didn't look like any person or animal I recognized. It was pale and seemed to blend into the dust around it, almost like it was made of the same stuff. I showed the photo to my wife, and she said she felt uneasy looking at it. We both agreed we couldn't explain it. I still think about those few hours, the silver dust, the frozen clocks, the silence, and wonder if it was something natural or something else. Whatever it was, it passed without a trace, leaving only a thin layer of dust and a strange gap in time. That's all I've got. No big story, no aliens coming through the door, just a weird night that didn't fit any explanation. And for now, that's enough to keep me looking at the sky a little longer when the sun goes down. I was flying a routine cargo run that night, nothing out of the ordinary, or so I thought. The job was simple, a night flight from Dallas to Kansas City, just me and the twin-engine Cessna. I'd done this route dozens of times, usually nothing to report except the usual weather chatter and some static from ATC. I took off right on schedule around 11:30 p.m. The sky was mostly clear, the usual stars out, nothing that looked odd. I climbed to my assigned cruising altitude about 8,000 feet and settled in. I flipped on the autopilot and started the usual checks, radioed in my position a couple of times. Everything felt normal. About 20 minutes into the flight, I noticed something on my radar that wasn't there before. I'm no stranger to random blips, sometimes birds, weather, or distant aircraft. But this one was different. It appeared at roughly the same altitude as me, maybe a little to the north, moving at about my speed. I tried to call it in, asked ATC if they had anything on their radar matching what I saw. They said no, nothing showed up on their screens except me. That was weird. The blip didn't move closer or further away, it kept pace, almost like it was following me. I checked visually out the window but couldn't see anything. No lights, no shape, nothing. I figured maybe it was some radar glitch or interference. These old planes have their quirks. Still, the blip stayed right there, keeping exactly my altitude and speed. Every time I adjusted course slightly, it followed. I tried to lose it by turning off the autopilot and changing speed, but it matched me again within seconds. The weird part was the silence over the radio. No other pilots reported anything, no chatter from ATC beyond the usual. It felt like I was alone out there with this thing, whatever it was. Around 30 minutes in, the air felt colder in the cockpit. The usual hum of the engine seemed quieter, or maybe I was just more aware of it. I double-checked all my instruments. Everything was working normally except the radar showing that persistent blip. I started feeling watched. Not like paranoia, just an odd awareness that something was right there but not visible. I kept scanning the dark sky, straining my eyes, hoping to catch a glimpse. The moon was behind clouds, so visibility wasn't great, but still, nothing. I decided to radio in again, asked for weather updates along the route. ATC answered, but their voices sounded distant, like they were underwater. That wasn't possible, but that's how it felt to me. Then static filled the channel for a few seconds before cutting out completely. I tried to call back, but the frequency was dead. The radar blip stayed. At one point, I glanced down at the controls and noticed my watch had stopped. That caught me off guard because I rely on it for timing fuel checks and logging flight hours. I fiddled with it, but the hands didn't move. The digital clock on the panel also blinked 12, even though I was sure it had the correct time when I took off. I shook my head and tried to focus on flying, but the feeling of unease grew. I was alone up there with something pacing me, something I couldn't see or identify. The normal comfort of the instruments and routine checks faded. About 10 minutes later, the object began to slowly close in on me. The blip on the radar moved a little closer, staying just out of sight. I was sure I'd see some kind of light or shape by now, but the sky was empty except for me. Then I heard it. Not on the radio or in the cockpit speakers, but in my ears, a low, high-pitched buzzing. It wasn't painful, more like a vibration. It lasted for a few seconds, had then stopped as suddenly as it started. The buzzing made me blink and lose focus for a moment. When I looked back at the radar, the blip was still there, closer now, matching my every move. I tried turning off the radar to see if it would disappear, but the moment I shut it off, the buzzing started again, louder this time. I flipped the radar back on, and the buzzing stopped. I was stuck. I didn't know if the buzzing was coming from the plane or if it was some kind of signal from that object. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it as electrical interference, but my gut said otherwise. Then out of nowhere, the blip shot straight up. It wasn't gradual, it just zoomed vertically, disappearing off the radar screen in seconds. The sudden movement left me breathless. I radioed ATC immediately to report what happened. They said their radar picked up nothing unusual. The radio crackled back to normal, voices clear and steady again. My watch and the panel clocks also started working again, showing the correct time. I tried to tell them what I saw, but the words felt strange coming out of my mouth, like I wasn't quite sure what I was saying. I finished the flight without anything else happening. The rest of the trip was uneventful, but I kept glancing at the sky, wondering if whatever it was still out there. After landing, I reported the incident to the Flight Operations Center. They logged it, but said they had no radar data confirming my sighting. The official line was probably some unexplained radar anomaly. But I know what I saw. I don't know if it was a drone, some new military tech, or something else. I don't even know if it was there in the way we think about things being there. All I know is it matched me, followed me, and then left in a way nothing I've ever seen before has. Since then, I've caught myself staring at the sky during night flights, wondering if I'll ever see that blip again. It's hard to explain without sounding crazy, but it changed how I think about what's up there when you're all alone at 8,000 feet. I never saw any lights, didn't hear any noise besides that buzzing in my ears, and I don't have a photo or radar tape to prove it. Just the memory of a silent, shadowy presence pacing me for nearly 40 minutes before vanishing in a blink. That's the story. It's not dramatic, no flashes or beams, just something unexplainable, quiet, and close enough to feel real, even if I still can't say what it was. I was on patrol late one night, driving a stretch of highway that cuts through mostly empty farmland. It's usually quiet out there around 2 or 3 a.m., just the occasional car or truck passing by, nothing unusual. I'd been on this route for a few hours, doing the usual, checking speeders, making sure there's no drunks or stranded motorists, that kind of thing. The road is straight for miles, with fields on both sides and only a few clusters of trees here and there. It's the kind of place where if something's off, you notice it right away. Around 2:45 a.m., I got a call about a semi-truck pulled over on the shoulder near mile marker 87. Nothing about the driver, just that the truck was stopped with the engine running and the door open. No one at the wheel or standing nearby. The dispatcher told me to check it out, but be careful. Sometimes there are drunks or people breaking down, and sometimes things aren't what they seem. I got there in about 5 minutes. The highway was empty except for the semi parked just off the road. The truck was a big rig, a white Peterbilt with a trailer that didn't have any obvious markings. It was idling quietly, lights on, but no driver in sight. The door was wide open, swinging a little in the breeze. I slowed down, flipped on the patrol lights, and pulled up alongside the truck. That's when I saw it. Right around the tires, in the dirt and grass circling the truck, there were these strange burn marks. Not your typical skid marks or tire burns. These were perfectly round, like someone had traced a circle with a hot iron all the way around the truck. The ground was blackened in a clean, even ring, about 10 feet across. The circle didn't break or smudge. It was just there, clear and almost unnatural. It looked fresh, like it had just happened. I stepped out, radio in hand, eyes scanning the area. No sign of the driver anywhere. No footprints, no tracks leading away from the truck, except the usual tire tracks on the shoulder. The engine was still running, the exhaust puffing out in small clouds in the cold night air. I called dispatch to report the situation and requested backup, just to have someone else check the area with me. I walked around the truck, looking for anything that could explain what I was seeing. No signs of struggle, no dropped belongings, nothing. The cab was empty, seats pushed back like someone had just gotten out quickly. The driver's door was wide open and the interior lights were still on. The radio was silent and the keys were still in the ignition. I reached inside and switched off the engine. The hum died down, leaving a heavy quiet. I shined my flashlight into the cab, scanning every corner. The dashboard was normal, no alarms or warnings. The GPS unit was on but frozen on the last location, right here on the highway. I opened the passenger door. The trailer was locked, no way to get inside without the key, which wasn't in the cab. I circled back outside, looking again at the burn marks. They were strange, definitely not something caused by fire from the engine or brakes. No signs of heat damage on the truck itself, just the ground around it. The grass outside the circle was untouched. I knelt down and touched the dirt. It was dry, not scorched to the touch, almost like the blackened ring was a stain rather than actual burn marks. My phone buzzed with a message from dispatch. Backup ETA 10 mins. I told them to hurry. I wasn't feeling comfortable at all. The night air felt thick, heavy, like something was pressing in. I scanned the fields around the truck, looking for movement or lights. Nothing. No houses or farms nearby, just empty land stretching to the horizon. The moon was hidden behind clouds, and the stars flickered dimly. I decided to check my own cruiser's dashcam footage from when I pulled up. The camera caught the truck from a few angles. I rewound the tape, looking for anything odd. For the first minute, it was normal. Me pulling up, headlights on the truck, engine running. Then, about 30 seconds before I stopped, I noticed something strange on the right side of the frame. There was a faint, almost transparent figure standing near the back of the trailer. I blinked, rewound again. The figure was just there, tall, thin, no clear features, pale but not glowing. It didn't move, just stood still, facing the truck. I watched closely for a minute, but it vanished as soon as I switched on the patrol lights. I stared at the screen, feeling cold. The figure was only visible for about 3 seconds, barely there, like a trick of the light or a glitch in the camera. But I know what I saw. Backup showed up right after that. 2 other officers got out and started helping me search the area. We called for a K9 unit to check the fields, but the dog didn't pick up any scent or tracks. It was like whoever or whatever had been there just disappeared. We stayed there for almost an hour. The truck stayed silent and empty, the engine off, the door still open. We checked the radio frequencies for any emergency signals, but found nothing. There were no calls from the driver, no distress signals. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The silence around us was almost too quiet. No insects, no animals, nothing but the hum of our own radios and the crunch of boots on gravel. When the tow truck finally arrived to haul the rig away, I took one last look at the burn marks. The circle was still there, black and sharp against the grass and dirt. The tow driver said he'd never seen anything like it. I filed the report as abandoned vehicle, PIA, since no one came forward to claim the truck or report it missing. The company registered on the trailer, never answered calls or emails. The driver was never identified. I checked local news for days after, hoping for some explanation, maybe a bad accident, a chase, or a rescue, but there was nothing. No sightings, no reports of missing persons matching the truck's description. That night stuck with me, not just because of the truck or the circle, but because of that figure on the camera. So clear and still, and yet impossible to place. Sometimes I replay the footage in my head and watch for it again, but it never appears the same way. I'm not sure what happened out there on that lonely stretch of highway. Maybe someone left in a hurry, or maybe it was something else altogether. All I know is the truck was there, running and empty, surrounded by that perfect circle, and something was watching from the shadows. I went home that night thinking I'd handled another strange call. But in the back of my mind, I couldn't stop wondering who or what just vanished without a trace, leaving only a black ring and a flicker on a dash cam to mark where it had been. I was scrolling through the security footage from my backyard camera one morning, just messing around like I do sometimes, when something caught my eye. It was a clip from a few nights before, recorded at 3:16 a.m. I hadn't noticed it before because it's one of those hours when the feed mostly shows nothing but shadows and the odd raccoon or squirrel. But this time, there was something else, something that didn't make any sense. The footage showed the backyard, mostly dark except for the faint glow from the streetlights filtering through the trees. The timestamp flicked on the screen showing exactly 3:16 a.m. At first, there was nothing unusual, just the usual empty yard, the swing on the porch, barely moving in the light breeze. Then for 3 frames, this figure appears near the edge of the yard by the fence. It's hard to describe exactly what I saw because it wasn't a clear shape like a person or animal. The figure was kind of vague, pale like the color of bleached skin, but it didn't have any features at all. No eyes, no mouth, no hair. Just a smooth, featureless outline, standing completely still. Not blurred or fuzzy like it was moving fast, just there, like a shadow but oddly bright. It only shows up for 3 frames. That's less than 1/10 of a second. Just a quick flash of something standing there perfectly still, then gone. The rest of the video before and after that is completely normal. No movement, no sound. The timestamp keeps rolling like nothing happened. I watched it over and over. I slowed it down frame by frame. There's no question it's there, no question it disappears suddenly. I zoomed in as much as the camera would allow, but the figure stayed smooth and blank. No texture, no shadows, no depth. Like it wasn't really part of the scene, or maybe wasn't quite real. At first, I thought it was a glitch in the camera or the software. I've had random pixel glitches before, weird light flares, bugs in the night footage, but this didn't behave like those. It was way too distinct. It wasn't a flicker or a light spot. The figure's shape was defined, standing upright and in the exact same spot for the 3 frames. I tried everything I could think of. I reset the system, updated the firmware, checked the wiring. I even tested the camera outside during the day and at night, looking for anything that might cause reflections or false images. Nothing came close to producing anything like what I saw in that clip. What got me the most was the timing. 3:16 a.m. is the same exact time every night. I went back and checked footage from the previous nights at 3:16 and nothing. Then the night after and the night after that, still nothing. Just that one clip. I didn't feel like someone was in the backyard. There were no signs of forced entry, no footprints in the grass, no open doors or windows. Nothing disturbed. I live alone in a quiet neighborhood where people don't usually walk around at night, especially not that late. It wasn't like the figure moved toward the house or did anything threatening. It just stood there, silent and motionless. Watching, maybe? I don't know. The weirdest part is that it doesn't look human. Not in any normal sense. The way it was featureless, pale, and so still felt wrong, like something that didn't belong in the real world. I started paying more attention to the backyard after that. I kept the porch light on some nights, and I made sure the cameras were recording everything. But nothing else happened. No movement, no strange noises. Just quiet, like before. I did notice some other strange things around the same time, though. Like the streetlights nearby would flicker on and off in a weird pattern, sometimes for just a few seconds, sometimes longer. It wasn't a power issue either. Other houses down the street didn't have problems. It was like something was interfering with the lights right around my place. Once I woke up around 3 a.m. to a faint humming sound outside. It wasn't loud, just a low mechanical hum that lasted maybe a minute before fading away. I looked outside, but the yard was empty. No cars, no animals, nothing visible. I thought maybe it was my imagination or a transformer down the street acting up. But that hum matched the time when the figure showed up on the footage. I didn't tell anyone about this at first. It felt ridiculous, like something out of a bad horror movie. But the more I thought about it, the more unsettled I got. There was no clear threat, but the presence of that figure and the odd noises made the place feel off. I even tried talking to my neighbors, casually bringing up the flickering lights or the humming, but no one else noticed anything unusual. They thought I was imagining things or dealing with insomnia. The strangest thing happened a week later. I checked the footage again, just for the hell of it, and found something else on a different night, around 2:58 a.m. This time, a shadow flickered across the corner of the yard for a couple of frames. It wasn't like the pale figure, more like a shape moving too fast to make out. Then it vanished. I can't say what it was or why it was there. I can't say if it's connected to the figure from before or just a coincidence. But it felt like something was watching me from the edges of my yard, something I couldn't see clearly, something I couldn't explain. I got a second security camera and installed it facing the house from a different angle. For a while, everything seemed normal. No new strange images, no sounds, no flickers. Then, on a night when I was out late and came home close to 3 a.m., I felt like someone was following me. I didn't see anyone, but I kept hearing soft footsteps on the gravel behind my car after I parked. When I turned around, nothing was there. I started leaving the porch light on all night, but it didn't help. The footsteps stopped after a few nights, but the feeling never went away. I keep looking at the footage, hoping for answers, or maybe just a clue about what I'm dealing with. The pale figure still haunts me because it doesn't fit any explanation I have. It's not human, it's not an animal, it's not a glitch, it's just there, for 3 frames, then gone. I've tried talking to friends, but they think I'm overthinking it. I don't blame them. It sounds insane when I say it out loud. I'm just sharing this because maybe someone else has seen something like it, or maybe just to get it out of my head. I don't know what it was or what it wanted. All I know is that at 3:16 a.m., something was standing in my backyard, looking without a face, watching without moving for less than a second. And I'm still trying to figure out why. I was driving home from work, same route I always take, Route 48 westbound, around 6:40 p.m. It was still light out, early spring, a little overcast but dry. Traffic wasn't bad. I had my dash cam running like usual. It's one of those habits I picked up after a fender bender a couple years ago. I don't even think about it anymore. Just plug it in, forget it. I was about 20 minutes from home, doing around 65 in the middle lane when I saw something, just for a second, zip across the sky and disappear over the tree line. My first thought was drone, but it was too fast. Then maybe a bird, but there wasn't any flapping, and the shape was wrong. It was shiny, almost reflective, and it moved in a dead straight line. I looked around to see if anyone else reacted, but no brake lights, no one slowing down or pointing. Just me, apparently. It felt like it had come from behind and shot across in front of the car, way up, but not that far up, maybe a few 100 feet at most. No sound, no smoke trail. It was just gone. I figured I imagined it or caught a weird glint off a plane or something. I kept driving. Didn't think much more of it until I got home and pulled the dashcam card to check something unrelated. I was trying to see if a guy had cut me off earlier near the off-ramp. While scrubbing through the footage, I remembered the flash across the sky and figured I'd check if it showed up. And it did, or it would have. Right at the timestamp, 6:43 p.m., the footage jumps. It cuts out for about a second and then comes back. There's this quick flicker of static, then everything's normal again, but that missing second is right when the object would have crossed the frame. The rest of the file is fine. Before and after are totally normal. You can even see the frame where I start to lean forward a little, like I'm reacting, but the part where the thing should have been, it's just gone. That bugged me. I've had the camera for almost 3 years and never had corrupted footage like that. It records in 1-minute chunks, and if something goes wrong, usually the whole minute's toast. But this was just a blip, like someone cut a single second out clean. I ran a file repair tool on it, thinking maybe I could recover the missing second, but it didn't work. The software showed a timing mismatch at exactly that point, but couldn't fix it. Said the data was non-existent, not just damaged. Later that night, I went back to the car to make sure the camera was working right. I turned it on, recorded a few minutes, played it back, everything looked fine. I even tried jostling the power cable and driving around the block to see if I could recreate the glitch. Nothing. Totally normal. I was already feeling weird about it, and then I noticed something else. When I looked at the dashcam mount, it had been slightly twisted, like it had been bumped or rotated just a couple degrees toward the passenger side. Not by much, but I'm obsessive about the angle. I line it up with the center of the hood. I know it wasn't off when I left work. There were no signs anyone had been in the car. Doors locked, alarm never went off, no scuff marks or fingerprints. Just that slight shift. I wouldn't have noticed it if I hadn't been watching so closely. The next morning, I was tempted to leave the dashcam off. Just this weird feeling, like it was watching me instead of the road. I know that sounds dumb. I left it on anyway. Nothing weird happened for a couple days. Then, Thursday night, I was stopped at a red light downtown near the old overpass by 6th. I glanced at the rear view and saw something reflecting in the window of the car behind me. It looked like a glint of metal, but up high, maybe 50 feet up. Just a quick shimmer like sunlight bouncing off a mirror. I turned around, but there was nothing in the sky. I looked back at the reflection, and the glint was gone. It could have been anything. Maybe a power line catching the light, but there was no sun. It had dipped behind clouds over an hour earlier. I didn't sleep great that night. Every time a car passed outside my apartment, I woke up. I kept thinking I was hearing something soft and mechanical, almost like a low whir or buzz, but it was probably just the fridge cycling. Friday morning, I went back through all my dashcam clips from the past week just to reassure myself. They were normal, except for the corrupted one. I watched it again, over and over, that little hiccup at 6:43. I tried frame by frame just before the glitch, and on the last clean frame, there's something in the top right corner. Just a blur. Could be lens flare, could be a bug mid-flight. But when I zoomed in, it looked like a thin silver arc, almost crescent-shaped, with a shadow underneath. It didn't match anything else in the shot. No power lines, no clouds, no birds, nothing that could explain it. That weekend, I drove out to the same stretch of Route 48 around the same time. I parked on the shoulder and waited. Just sat there, engine off, windows down. I didn't see anything. But around 7:15, my radio, FM, not satellite, started hissing and cutting out. It kept jumping stations like I was spinning the dial, but I wasn't touching anything. I turned it off. When I turned it back on, it reset to 87.7, which is just static in our area. It's never done that before. I got out and checked under the hood, thinking maybe something was messing with the electrical. Nothing looked off. Back in the driver's seat, I went to check the dash cam. The light was off. It hadn't been recording. I unplugged it and plugged it back in. The screen came on, but it said card error. The same card I'd used for months, the one that worked fine earlier that day. I took it inside later and tried it on 2 different computers. It read as empty. Not corrupted, just blank. Like someone wiped it clean. After that, I stopped using the dash cam for a while. I still have it, but it's sitting in a drawer now. I don't trust it. Last thing, and maybe this is unrelated, but about 2 weeks after all that, I was pulling into the lot at work when I noticed a black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted dark. Nothing unusual about the vehicle itself, but it was there when I arrived at 8:15 and still there when I went to lunch around 1. No one got in or out. It was just idling the whole time. When I left at 5:30, it was gone. I haven't seen it since. I don't know if that means anything. Maybe it's just me connecting dots that aren't there. But I didn't see that object with my eyes and the camera glitch for no reason. Something crossed that sky. I saw it, and for some reason, the footage didn't want to keep it. I was camping out near the Utah-Nevada border, about an hour and a half south of Wendover. Just dirt roads and scrub brush for miles. I'd gone out there alone with my truck and a basic tent setup. Nothing fancy. I've done solo desert trips for years. Something about the emptiness calms me. I got there in the late afternoon, set up camp about a quarter mile off the main dirt road near a dry wash. The sun was still high, sky was clear. No one else around, no other tire tracks, no sounds of vehicles in the distance. Just wind and occasional buzzing from those big desert flies. After a quick dinner, just a sandwich and some chips, I took a short hike up a nearby hill to get a better view before dark. The shadows stretched out fast, and it got cold quicker than I expected. I was back at the tent by sunset, lit a small fire, sat out for a while watching the sky. It was the kind of night where you could see every single star. That deep desert silence. It was probably around 10 when I noticed something off. The first thing was the shift in the wind. It had been coming in steady from the east, but suddenly it dropped off completely. Not just calmer, totally still. No breeze, no movement in the brush, not even the slight hiss you get from wind moving over open land. That felt strange. Then there was this subtle drop in sound. I know that sounds vague, but the desert has a kind of background noise. Distant insects, night birds, whatever. And it just cut off. Like someone turned down the volume. It wasn't dead silent exactly, but it felt muffled. Like the way your ears pop in an airplane, except mine didn't. I got up and walked a few yards away from the fire, trying to figure out what had changed. That's when I saw the stars blink out, slowly, in a straight line, like something was passing in front of them. At first, I thought it was a cloud, even though the forecast had been clear. But it wasn't shaped like a cloud. It was too precise. Straight edges, sharp corners. It moved smoothly without wobbling or shifting, just a huge dark shape gliding across the sky. It made no sound, not even the low hum you'd expect from a plane or a drone. And it didn't reflect anything. No lights, no shine. It didn't glow or blink. It was just darker than the sky around it, blotting out stars as it moved. I stood there maybe 10-15 seconds, just watching it drift. It was big. I couldn't guess how far up it was, but it covered a chunk of sky the size of a football field held at arm's length, bigger than any aircraft I've ever seen. I don't remember backing up, but I ended up bumping into the back of my truck. I kept my eyes on it the whole time. As it moved west to east, I saw the stars start to reappear behind it, like it had no trail, no blur, just on and then off, like flipping switches. The whole thing took maybe a minute, maybe less. But the feeling stuck. I felt exposed, like standing in front of something that knew I was there, even if it didn't stop. I didn't feel watched exactly. It was more like I'd stumbled into something that wasn't meant to be seen. After it passed, the sound didn't come back right away. It stayed quiet for a while, maybe 5 minutes. The wind eventually picked up again, light at first, then normal. I waited by the truck, still watching the sky, but I didn't see anything else. I didn't go back into the tent. I ended up sitting in the driver's seat of my truck with the door open and one foot on the ground, just listening. I left the fire burning low and kept checking the sky. I don't know what I was expecting. I didn't feel safe inside the tent, though. Somewhere around midnight, I decided I wasn't sleeping out there. I didn't pack up, just threw my bag in the truck and left the tent and gear behind. The truck started fine. I didn't have a GPS signal, but I knew the roads well enough to get back to the highway. Driving out, I kept glancing at the rear view, like I was waiting to see something following. Nothing was there, but I couldn't shake the feeling. About 10 miles down the dirt road, I passed a spot I didn't recognize. I mean, I should have recognized it. I'd driven that road dozens of times. But this section had an odd curve I didn't remember. It looked familiar, but not exactly right. Like something had been moved or rebuilt, except there were no signs of construction or damage. Just different. Then the truck's dash lights flickered once. Nothing major, just a quick dim, then back to normal. But it was enough to make me tap the brakes and sit for a minute with the engine idling. The stars looked normal again. No shapes, no movement. I got back to the paved road around 1:30. Once I had cell service again, I checked the weather and satellite info. Clear skies all night. No military activity reported in the area, nothing on local news the next day. A week later, I went back to grab my gear. Tent was still there, untouched, nothing missing. But when I checked my fire pit, the ashes were blown evenly in every direction, like they'd been scattered gently by a big circular gust, but the surrounding dirt hadn't been disturbed. That was odd. I also found my folding chair flipped over about 15 feet from where I'd left it. There were no tracks around it, no animal prints, no drag marks, just the chair sitting on its side like it had been dropped there. That was the last time I camped alone out there. I haven't told many people. I've tried to figure out what it could have been, but nothing lines up. It didn't behave like anything I know, just a huge silent thing that wasn't supposed to be there. We were about an hour into the hike when we first saw it. Mara and I had gotten a late start. We were visiting her sister that weekend in Vermont, and we decided to try this near Groton that she'd bookmarked months ago. Real quiet place. No one else on the lot when we parked, and we didn't see a single person the whole way up. Trail was steep, but nothing crazy. Mostly pine and fir all the way. She was a little nervous about the time, since the sun was already starting to dip, but I told her we'd make it to the lookout and back, with plenty of daylight left. Around halfway up, there's this bend where the trees thin out just enough to get a decent view of the hills across the valley. The sun was low and throwing this orange light across everything, and for a second I thought that was what caught my eye, just the color of the trees shifting. But then I saw the shape. It was on the far side of the ridge, black, huge, like a triangle. That's all I could think to call it, a flat triangle. No markings, no lights, no sound, just gliding, steady, maybe 100 feet above the tree line. I tapped Mara's shoulder and pointed. She saw it too. We just stood there, both squinting through the branches, trying to make sense of what we were looking at. It was moving slow, not hovering exactly, but not flying like a plane would. No tilt or wings or anything like that. It didn't reflect any light either. The sunset was hitting the tops of the trees below it, but this thing stayed pitch black, like it was absorbing the light. I pulled out my phone, but by the time I got the camera up, it was already sliding behind the ridge, gone in maybe 10 seconds. I didn't even snap a photo. Just stared, waiting for it to reappear, but it never did. We kept hiking. I think we both wanted to reach the lookout to see if it was maybe headed that way, or if we'd get a better angle. But we didn't talk about it much. Mara asked once, "Did you hear anything?" I said no, and that was it. The air had gone dead silent while we watched it, but it didn't seem weird at the time. Only later did that part start to bother me. About 20 minutes later, we reached the top. There's a flat rocky area that opens up with a view across the whole valley. You can see for miles. We both looked right where we thought the thing was headed. Nothing. We stood there scanning the sky, turning in circles, thinking maybe it had moved behind another hill or we'd catch a glimpse of it in the distance. But the sky was clear. No clouds, no contrails, no sound. Just blue fading to purple as the sun dropped. The trees below were still, no wind at all. I don't remember hearing any birds either. We waited up there longer than we meant to. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. The light kept fading, and I could tell Mara wanted to head back, but neither of us said anything. I kept thinking I'd see it again, that maybe if I waited just one more minute, I'd catch a corner of it poking out behind a ridge or a shadow crossing the treetops, but it was like it'd never been there at all. We finally started heading back. The trail got darker fast, trees close in tight near the top, and once the sun's gone, it feels like night hits all at once. We had flashlights in our packs, but we didn't turn them on right away. Just walked in the dim, both quiet. I kept checking the sky through the gaps in the branches. I don't know what I was expecting. Some kind of movement, a blink of light, anything. But the sky was empty. No stars yet. Just this blank, darkening space that felt way too quiet. Then, maybe 10 minutes into the descent, we both stopped at the same time. I didn't hear anything at first. That's what was weird. I stopped because she stopped. I looked at her, and she was staring up through the trees behind us, mouth slightly open. There was a sound now. Low, deep. Not a rumble exactly, but close. A slow, vibrating hum. More felt than heard, like a bass note coming from inside your chest. It didn't come from ahead of us or behind. It came from above. We both turned our lights on. The beam lit up the trunks around us, branches swaying just a little, but when I tilted mine up, the light stopped, like it hit something. I thought it was just fog at first, or maybe my flashlight wasn't cutting through the air right, but it felt more solid than that. The light just didn't go far. It was like shining it at a wall. There was a shape above the trees, not lit, not moving, just a blackness darker than the sky. I couldn't see an edge, just the impression of something massive just hanging there. The hum kept going. We didn't say anything. I think we both thought the same thing. Don't run, don't talk. Just keep walking. We moved fast but steady the rest of the way down. Neither of us looked up again. That part I remember clearly. We both kept our heads down like we didn't want to draw attention to ourselves, like it might notice. By the time we got back to the car, the sound was gone. It faded as we got closer to the lot, but it didn't trail off like a normal noise would. It was just suddenly not there. We got in and drove without saying anything. It wasn't until we were back on the main road about 10 minutes out that Mara asked if I'd seen it again in the trees. I told her yeah, or at least something blocking the stars. She nodded and didn't say anything else. I checked the news later that night. Weather sites, flight tracking apps, even some local forums. Nothing. No reports of low-flying aircraft, no power outages, no strange lights. No one else posted anything about it. I asked her the next morning if she thought we should report it somewhere. She just looked at me and said, "And say what?" We didn't talk about it again after that. I keep trying to make sense of it, but there's nothing to grab onto. No clear memory of what it was, just this massive thing moving silent above the trees. Too big to miss, too quiet to be real, like it didn't belong in the same world we were standing in. It started with the porch light. I'd always left it on overnight, mostly because I lived alone and the motion sensor in the driveway didn't always pick up deer. The light was one of those older halogen flood bulbs, stayed on until I shut it off manually in the morning. Reliable, never gave me problems. Then one night, I woke up around 2:40 a.m. to use the bathroom. On the way back to bed, I noticed this faint flickering through the front window. I assumed it was the bulb finally going bad. After all, it'd been out there since I bought the house. But when I looked out, it wasn't just flickering randomly. It was blinking in a steady rhythm. About 1 second on, 1 second off. Over and over, no variation. It kept going as I watched for maybe 10 or 15 seconds. When I opened the front door and stepped out onto the porch, it stopped. Just went back to being solid. I waited for a minute, didn't see anything unusual. No animals, no wind, no buzzing like it was shorting. I chalked it up to maybe moisture in the fixture or something and went back inside. Next night, same thing. Woke up a little before 2:45, walked past the window and saw it blinking again. Same rhythm, exactly. When I opened the door, it stopped immediately. That happened 4 nights in a row. On the fifth night, I decided I wasn't imagining it and stayed up late with a notepad. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching the front window. At exactly 2:41 a.m., the porch light started blinking. Perfect 1-second intervals. I timed it. 12 full seconds of blinking. I cracked the front door, and the moment the air moved, the light held steady again, just like before. I didn't go outside that time. I just stood there for a while, staring out past the porch into the yard. It's a wide lot, about an acre, and it backs up to woods on 3 sides. No streetlights, no nearby neighbors, just forest. The weirdest part was how quiet it was. No crickets, no wind, just this heavy stillness, like everything had paused. That night, I unplugged the light entirely before I went back to bed. The next morning, I checked the wiring. I'm not an electrician, but I know the basics. The line looked clean, no fraying, no evidence of shorts. The switch wasn't buzzing, and the bulb looked fine. I replaced the bulb anyway, just in case. The night after that, I didn't leave the light on, just kept the house dark and watched from the living room again. At 2:41 a.m., nothing happened for a second or two. Then the motion sensor in the driveway clicked, the one that hadn't worked reliably in weeks. It clicked on, but only for a second, long enough to flash and go dark again. That kind of got to me. The next day, I bought a trail cam. Mounted it above the door, pointing toward the porch and the front yard. Left the porch light on again that night. I stayed in bed, didn't get up when it started blinking. Just let the camera record. In the morning, I pulled the SD card and checked the footage. The camera didn't catch anything. It picked up the light starting to flicker, then froze. The footage skipped straight from 2:40:56 to 2:43:13 with nothing in between. The timer didn't reset, there was just a dead chunk of silence, like something had blanked out those 2 minutes. I tried again the next night, using a different card. Same thing. A chunk of video just missing from that window of time. I tried recording from inside the house through the window with my phone on a tripod. This time, I saw the light blink exactly 13 times. When I stepped out onto the porch, like always, it stopped, but my phone had shut off. Battery at 87%, plugged in. No error, no alert, just black screen. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. It wasn't just the porch light anymore. A few nights later, I woke up not to the flicker, but to the sound of something knocking, very lightly, on the side of the house near the back bedroom. Not loud enough to be alarming. More like the kind of tapping you'd do if you didn't want to wake someone up but still wanted them to hear it. It went on for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I didn't get up. The next night, same thing. Flickering porch light, and a few minutes later, that same tapping sound. Different wall this time, near the kitchen. I finally called a friend of mine who used to work security for a local firm. He said it sounded like someone casing the property. I had cameras up by then, but nothing ever showed. Nothing ever triggered the motion alerts. I had him come over one night to stay on the couch and watch with me. At 2:41, we both saw the porch light start blinking. 12 times. He stood up to go outside, and I told him not to open the door. Just watch. He agreed, stood still near the window. On the 13th blink, the light cut out entirely. Not off, dead, like someone had yanked the breaker. We stood there in the dark, just listening. About 30 seconds later, we heard the crunch of leaves in the yard. Not close, probably 30 feet out, but it was a single footstep. Just one. He went out the back door with a flashlight and his sidearm, circled the property, found nothing. When he came back inside, the porch light was back on, solid, like nothing had happened. He didn't sleep that night either. Over the next week, the light started blinking longer. 14 seconds, then 15. Same pattern, just more of it. Every time I stepped outside, it would stop. Eventually, I just stopped checking. I'd lie in bed and wait for it to pass. One night, I didn't hear the tapping on the walls. Instead, I heard something walking along the gravel on the side of the house. Slow, deliberate steps. Gravel doesn't sound like anything else when it's walked on. I sat up in bed, heart pounding, waited for it to stop. The steps ended near the bedroom window. Nothing after that. I didn't move. In the morning, I found a single small on the windowsill, about the size of a grape. I don't know why that disturbed me more than the other stuff, but it did. Something about how deliberate it felt, like it was placed there. After that, The blinking stopped for a while, maybe a week. Then it came back, shorter this time, just 6 or 7 blinks a night. I noticed that the motion sensor by the back shed, one I hadn't even thought about in months, started activating randomly around 2:30 a.m. No lights nearby, no wind, no animals on the camera. Just sudden bursts of activity, then nothing. I disconnected the sensor. Didn't help. Now and then I'd find little things out of place in the yard. A garden hose dragged a few feet from where I left it, a lawn chair turned facing the woods. I started sleeping in the guest room on the other side of the house. Eventually it just faded. I don't know exactly when. One night I realized I hadn't seen the porch light blink in maybe 2 weeks. I stayed up just to be sure, and nothing happened. No blinking, no sounds, but I still wake up at 2:41 almost every night, even now. I just lie there, listening. I was 16 when it happened. I used to sneak out sometimes, not to party or drink or anything, just to get away. My house was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. You could hear my parents' marriage falling apart in the silences between the arguments. I'd wait until they were asleep, then grab a hoodie and climb out the window. There's a trail behind our neighborhood that cuts through the woods and leads to a small clearing. Nothing special, just tall grass, a few rocks, and a wide view of the sky. No streetlights. I'd go there and lie on my back with my headphones in and stare up. This one night in July, it was clearer than usual. I remember that specifically because the stars looked sharper, like they were closer somehow. I stayed longer than I normally would, probably until a little past 2 a.m. I didn't feel tired. It was just quiet. I had this app on my phone that mapped out constellations, pointed at the sky, and it would label everything. I wasn't super into astronomy, but I liked being able to name the stuff I was looking at. At some point, I saw a light that didn't match anything on the app, just a tiny pinprick, brighter than the stars but not moving. Thought maybe it was a planet, but it wasn't where Venus or Jupiter should have been. It just sat there. After a few minutes, I noticed it looked kind of wrong, like too steady. It wasn't twinkling like the stars. No halo, just this single perfect dot. I stared at it until my eyes started to ache a little. Then it moved. Not fast, but smoothly, just a short shift to the left. Then it stopped again. Still no blinking, no trail. It was like someone had dragged a cursor across the sky. I sat up, pulled my headphones out, and just watched. It stayed there for maybe another minute. Then it split. That's the only way I know how to describe it. The single light separated into 3 smaller ones, evenly spaced like a triangle. No sound, no trails, just one light becoming 3. They hovered in formation, completely still. I remember thinking it looked too clean, like geometry, not nature. I watched for maybe 10-15 seconds. Then the lights flickered, just once, and disappeared. Not like they zoomed off. 1 second they were there, and the next they weren't. I waited another hour, hoping they'd come back. They didn't. When I got home, I tried to look up if anyone had seen anything. There was nothing online. I checked local Facebook groups, weather cams, even the town's subreddit. No one said a word. I figured maybe I imagined it. Maybe I dozed off for a second and dreamed it. But the next night, I went back to the same spot. Same time, same clear sky. Nothing happened. I did that for a week. Just sat out there alone, watching. On the 3rd night, I noticed something else. This low buzzing in my ears. Not loud, but like a pressure. Almost like when you're in a plane. It would come and go in waves. I checked my phone to see if it was picking up any weird signals, but the battery was draining faster than usual. By the 6th night, I was barely sleeping. I kept thinking about those lights. I'd look at the stars and wonder if they were watching me back. It wasn't until the 7th night that something new happened. I'd been sitting out there for about half an hour, no lights, no noise, just bugs chirping. Then everything went quiet, like someone hit mute on the woods. No crickets, no wind, not even leaves rustling. I stood up. It was a stillness that felt heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Then I saw a single flash, not in the sky but near the tree line. Just a quick white blink, low to the ground, maybe 40 or 50 feet away. I didn't move. It flashed again, same spot. I thought maybe someone else was out there with a flashlight, but the light didn't move. It just blinked on and off, perfectly timed. I whispered, "Hello?" but nothing answered. Then it stopped. A few seconds later, something cracked in the woods. Not a small stick, something big. I turned and walked fast back to the trail, trying not to run. I didn't hear anything following me, but I didn't stop to check. After that, I stopped going out there. I told my friend Josh about it a few days later. He laughed at first, but when I mentioned the buzzing sound and the blinking light, he got kind of quiet. He said his cousin, who lived on the other side of town, had seen something weird a few summers ago, lights moving in ways they shouldn't. I asked him if his cousin reported it. He said no. He said no. No one ever does. About a month later, I noticed my compass app wasn't working. The needle would spin slowly even when I held the phone flat. I re-downloaded it, but it still didn't work right. GPS 2 kept jumping my location by a few blocks. My phone also started freezing around 2 a.m. almost every night. Never during the day. It's probably nothing, probably. But once in a while, if I wake up late and look out the window, I get this feeling like there's something just out of sight, like I missed it by a few seconds. I never saw those lights again. But that buzzing comes back sometimes, only at night, only when I'm alone. I was on a red-eye flight from Chicago to Denver, sitting by the window in row 17, middle seat. It wasn't a busy flight, mostly business travelers trying to get some sleep before meetings. I don't usually care much about window views on planes, especially at night, but this time I was wide awake for some reason. The seatbelt sign was off, and the plane had leveled off at cruising altitude, just below the cloud layer. I looked out the window almost absent-mindedly and caught something, a flash of light. At first, I thought it was just the reflection of the cabin lights, or maybe a star. But then I noticed a shape, a dark silhouette, moving alongside the plane. It was below the cloud layer, staying steady with us. I blinked and looked again, trying to make sense of it. The plane was cruising around 35,000 feet, so I wasn't expecting anything to be flying right beside us. The shape didn't have any lights that I could see. It was just a dark, smooth shape moving exactly with us, matching our speed and altitude horizontally. I tried to point it out to the guy next to me, but he was already asleep with headphones on. The flight attendants were passing by with their carts, chatting quietly with passengers. I asked the woman across the aisle if she saw it, but she shook her head, saying she hadn't looked outside yet. For a while, I just watched it, feeling kind of weird. It was moving so steadily, no signs of turbulence or flapping wings or engine noise. It didn't look like any plane I've ever seen. No flashing navigation lights, no blinking strobes, nothing. I pulled my phone out, hoping to get a photo, but the windows were tinted heavily, and the low light made it nearly impossible. I tried snapping a few shots anyway, but all I got were black squares with a faint outline. I started wondering if it was some kind of military drone or a weather balloon, but none of that made sense to me. The shape was way bigger than any drone I'd seen, and weather balloons don't move that fast or stay that close. Also, the thing just kept pace with us, no change in speed or altitude. I checked the in-flight entertainment screen to see if there was any mention of something unusual in the news or weather alerts, but nothing. The other passengers were quiet, some watching movies, others dozing. The shape was there for maybe 20 minutes, maybe more. I kept looking back and forth, half expecting it to vanish, but it stayed right where it was. I didn't feel like calling the flight attendants over because it seemed like something I shouldn't say out loud, like I'd sound crazy or cause a fuss. Then, around 40 minutes in, the shape started to slowly pull away. It didn't fly off in a dramatic burst or anything. It just gradually drifted behind us, descending slowly until it disappeared below the cloud layer. I felt kind of strange after that. My ears popped a little, and I got this mild headache, like I'd been staring too hard at something I wasn't supposed to see. When I glanced back out, the sky was empty, just stars and clouds. The rest of the flight was normal. The captain came on to say we'd be landing soon, the usual stuff. I kept my eyes on the window a few more times, but the shape didn't come back. I asked the flight crew when we landed if anyone else had reported anything unusual, but they looked at me like I was joking or maybe had a weird dream. I didn't push it. I never saw any news reports or anything about strange aircraft that night. No announcements from the airline about military exercises or anything that might explain it. It's been a while now, and I'm still not sure what I saw. It wasn't a plane or a bird, not something normal. But it also wasn't some flashy UFO with lights or beams, just a dark shape pacing me in the sky, quiet and steady. Sometimes I wonder if anyone else on that flight saw it and just didn't say anything. Or maybe it was just me, seeing something that wasn't really there. I don't know. But I remember watching that shape moving beside us, silent and unblinking, like it was there for a reason I couldn't figure out. I was sitting in the living room one morning sipping coffee when my wife called me outside. She was standing at the back door, staring out with this weird, tense look on her face. I went out to see what was up, and the first thing I noticed was the frost on the grass. It was one of those cold mornings where everything is coated in this thin, white frost, sparkling in the early sunlight. But then I saw it. A huge section of the backyard was scorched, like something had burned the grass in a perfect spiral pattern. I mean, it wasn't just a weird shape or some random burned spot. It was this clean, almost precise spiral that covered a good third of the yard. What was weirder was that the frost was still untouched outside the spiral. It looked like something had burned the grass in that exact pattern without disturbing anything around it. No footprints, no melted frost, no scorched patches outside the spiral. My mind immediately went to the usual explanations. Some dumb kid with fireworks, or maybe a grill that got knocked over. But the shape was just so strange, like someone had drawn a giant spiral with fire. And the rest of the yard was completely normal. Frost still settled everywhere else. If someone had been out there, they'd have left footprints, crushed the frost, something. But there was nothing. I called my neighbor over, hoping for some sort of explanation, or even just to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. He was just as puzzled as I was. He said he hadn't noticed anything the night before, and neither had anyone else around. Weird things had been happening the days leading up to this. Nothing that made sense at the time, just little things, like the power flickering at odd times, but only for a second. My wife said she'd seen strange lights flickering in the trees behind the house late at night, but when she looked out, nothing was there. I thought maybe it was just the street lights or headlights from cars, but it never happened the same way twice. There was also this constant low hum coming from the backyard sometimes, like a machine running somewhere far away, but when I tried to find the source, it stopped. The whole thing felt off, like something was there, just out of reach. After the spiral appeared, my wife was on edge. We didn't sleep well that night. I kept hearing noises outside, just faint rustling or cracking branches. We'd look out the windows, but the yard was empty. No animals, no people. Just the spiral and the frost. The next day, I tried to take pictures of the spiral in daylight. The pattern was clearer then, almost like the grass had been chemically burned or scorched by something hot, but it was too perfect to be natural. The edges of the spiral were sharp and well defined. I didn't want to touch it, honestly. It felt wrong. I started noticing odd smells around the yard, too. A kind of burnt metal or something chemical, but I couldn't place it exactly. It was faint, and it didn't linger, but it was definitely there, especially near the spiral. Over the next few days, nothing else appeared in the yard, but the frost kept coming every night like clockwork. The spiral didn't change or fade. It just sat there like a scar on the earth. I told a couple of friends about it, and one of them suggested it might be some kind of animal territory, marking, or natural phenomenon. But none of it made sense. Animals don't burn grass in perfect spirals, and natural fires don't leave frost untouched around them. One night, about a week after the spiral showed up, I was outside having a smoke when I noticed something moving near the tree line at the edge of the yard. It was dark, almost a shadow, but it was there. I froze and stared. It didn't come closer or move away, just stayed still. I called my wife, but when she looked, it was gone. I felt this weird pressure in my chest, like I was being watched but couldn't see the watcher. The silence that followed was heavier than the night usually felt. I kept thinking about that spiral, how strange it looked in the frost, how quiet everything was around it. It was like some sort of boundary had been drawn there, like the spiral was a marker or a warning, but from what or whom, I had no idea. The frost kept coming every night, the spiral stayed, and the feeling of being watched didn't go away. No one else seemed to notice or care. It was just our backyard now, and something about it didn't feel right. I was 16, and it was a normal Thursday after school. I usually took the same route home from the bus stop, about 10 minutes on foot through a quiet neighborhood with a few streetlights and some trees lining the sidewalks. Nothing fancy, no weird shortcuts or anything. That day, I had my phone out, like always, scrolling through messages and music while walking. I didn't think much of it until I got home and plugged my phone into my laptop to charge. I noticed my voice recorder app had been on. I swear I never turned it on. I usually don't mess with that. The file was timestamped starting exactly when I'd gotten off the bus, right at the moment I started walking home. Curious, I hit play. The first few seconds were just static. Then I heard this faint clicking noise. It was metallic, like tapping or some kind of machinery, but really soft and distant. The clicking wasn't regular, like a clock ticking. It was random, uneven, sometimes faster, sometimes slower. It went on like that for almost an hour. That's when I realized something was wrong. My walk home was supposed to take 10 minutes. I didn't remember walking for an hour. I checked my messages, calls. Nothing showed I'd been anywhere else, and no one texted or called me during that time. I asked my mom if I'd come home late or if she'd noticed anything, but she said I got home on time, just like always. I tried to remember the walk itself. I usually notice things, the way the wind smells, streetlights flickering, a neighbor's dog barking, but this time, my memory was blank. Nothing. Like the whole walk was erased or skipped over. The next day, I went back over the route, trying to see if maybe I'd taken a wrong turn or got lost. The neighborhood was the same. I checked the streetlights and trees, hoping for some clue. Nothing seemed out of place. I listened to the recording a few more times. The clicking never changed, and the static was always there underneath. Sometimes I thought I heard faint voices, but it was impossible to make out words. It was like background noise you couldn't focus on. A few days later, I showed the recording to a friend who's into tech stuff. He said maybe it was interference or some app glitch, but when I played the recording on his phone, the clicking was still there, clear as day. He looked kind of unsettled and told me to be careful, like maybe something weird was going on. After that, I started feeling off when I walked home. Sometimes I thought I saw shadows moving just outside my vision, but when I turned, nothing was there. I felt like I was being watched, even in broad daylight. My phone would buzz or light up randomly, but it was always silent when I checked it. One night I checked my phone again and noticed a new recording file. I hadn't done anything with the recorder. This one was just about 20 seconds long, filled with that same static and clicking noise. No idea where it came from. I stopped using my phone on the walk home for a while. I tried to keep my head down, get home fast, but the feeling didn't go away. If anything, it got worse. I never saw anything concrete. No lights, no shapes, no people following me. Just that sound on the recording and that strange blankness in my memory. I kept thinking maybe I was just tired or stressed, but nothing else about my life was unusual. Eventually, I started taking the bus all the way home, even though it made me late. I didn't want to walk that route anymore. The recordings stayed on my phone. I never deleted them. I listened again sometimes, trying to figure out what that clicking was. I don't know. I still don't. I don't know what happened during that hour, and I don't know why I can't remember it. But that recording, that noise, it's the closest thing I have to proof that something was wrong that day. Something that I can't explain. I never talked about this before, not really. Not even with the guys I flew with. Not because I'm ashamed or anything like that. I just didn't want to stir up trouble or get people thinking I was nuts. But it's been years now, and I guess it's time to get it off my chest. I was flying an F-15 one night on a training exercise. Nothing special, just some routine radar work, drills, the usual. It was late, past midnight, out over the desert. The sky was clear, the kind of night where you can see every star if you're looking. My job was to keep the radar locked on targets the ground controllers threw at us and practice intercepting them. At first, it was just the usual blips, training drones, choppers, whatever the range had that night. But then, about an hour into the flight, something popped up that wasn't on the list. A blip, small but solid, moving fast and not like any drone or plane I'd seen before. I called it out, told ground control. They asked me to track it, so I turned the jet toward it and pushed the throttle forward. The thing moved faster and sharper than anything on their radar. No known aircraft that I knew of could do those maneuvers. I was closing in, trying to get a visual, but all I could see was black sky. No lights, no shape. The radar showed it darting left, right, accelerating, stopping suddenly, moves no human pilot could make in a jet that size. I kept trying to keep up, switching between manual and radar guided, but it was like chasing a ghost. I called in updates to ground control, but I didn't get much response back, just silence, static, or background chatter about the weather. After a while, I realized the thing was leading me somewhere. It wasn't just evading, it was drawing me out, farther away from the range, deeper into the desert night. I glanced at my fuel gauge. I wasn't supposed to be out that far, but I followed anyway. Part of me thought I might be chasing a new enemy drone or a secret weapons test I didn't know about. But I was starting to get nervous. At some point, the radar contact disappeared. Just vanished. No warning, no gradual fade. 1 second it was there, the next it was gone. I scanned the sky with my eyes. Nothing. No lights, no sound. I even toggled the night vision goggles on and off, hoping to catch something, but all I saw was the empty night sky. I radioed ground control. Contact lost, requesting status update. No response. I tried again, louder this time. Static. The comms were crackling, breaking up. I toggled channels. Nothing. I was flying solo out there with no support. My stomach tightened. I turned the jet around and headed back to base, still watching the radar screen. Nothing came up. The sky was completely silent. On the way back, I noticed something strange. The stars didn't look right. They were there, sure, but some of them flickered, at like a bad signal on a TV. Then I caught a faint glow in the corner of my vision, like a light just beyond the clouds. I glanced over, nothing. When I looked back, the glow was gone. Back at base, I ran through the debrief with my commanding officer. I told him about the contact, how it moved, how it disappeared. He nodded but didn't say much. No one else had reported anything. No alerts, no warnings, nothing in the logs. He asked if I'd checked the radar for glitches, if I'd been hallucinating. I said no, that the signal was solid, consistent, and the maneuvers were real. He didn't argue, just told me to file a report anyway. I did. I filled out the forms. But when I handed them in, I was told the report would be classified and buried. No public record, no investigation. Weeks later, I checked with a friend in intelligence. He said no one else saw the contact and no one was talking about it. The official story was that I must have picked up a glitch or a drone malfunction. I stopped bringing it up after that. The whole thing felt like a ghost story, except I was the only witness. I kept flying missions, but I never saw anything like it again. Sometimes when I'm flying at night, I wonder if that thing is still out there, moving through the sky, watching, waiting. I can't explain what it was or why it disappeared so suddenly, but I know what I saw, and I know what the radar showed. It wasn't anything we were supposed to find, and it didn't want to be found. I was out on my boat one night, just drifting a little ways offshore, trying to catch some late bass. The water was calm, the sky clear, and the stars were spread out like someone spilled glitter all over the dark. I'd been out there for a few hours, not much luck, just enjoying the quiet. I usually fish alone, especially at night. It's peaceful, and honestly, I like the silence out there. No radio, the boats, just the water and the occasional splash of a fish. Around midnight, I was looking out at the horizon, where the faint outline of a cargo ship sat anchored maybe a couple of miles away. I knew the shipping lanes well, and it wasn't unusual to see a freighter or two hanging out waiting for clearance to dock. I kept the boat on idle, just letting it drift gently with the current. That's when I noticed something odd. The ship suddenly lit up, not with its usual deck lights or navigation beacons, but with this cold, bluish light coming from above. It wasn't like a searchlight or the kind of lighting you see from a helicopter. This light was just there. It bathed the ship's deck in a pale blue glow, sharp and steady. but it didn't seem to move or come from any obvious source nearby. It was like a spotlight from the sky, but silent and steady. At first, I thought maybe it was a lighthouse beam or some weird reflection, but the angle was all wrong. The lighthouse was miles inland, and this light was coming straight down on the ship. I grabbed my binoculars to get a better look. The light didn't flicker or pulse. It just stayed on the ship, sharp and clear, outlining the containers and the deck equipment in that eerie blue glow. Then something strange happened. I started hearing this buzzing in my ears, a high-pitched, almost metallic hum. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, like the sound of electricity, but inside my head. It was hard to tell if it was coming from the boat or just in my ears, but it felt intense enough to make me stop whatever I was doing and just listen. The buzzing got louder, and I felt this weird pressure in my head. It wasn't painful, but it was uncomfortable, like the feeling you get when you're on an airplane descending and your ears pop, but more focused and persistent. I tried to look around, expecting to see a helicopter or a drone that might be shining that light or making the noise, but there was nothing. The sky was empty except for stars. The water around me was still, no wakes or ripples besides my own boat drifting. The ship kept glowing under that blue light. Then, just as suddenly as it appeared, the light snapped off, like someone flipped a switch. The buzzing stopped right away. Silence. The ship's deck went dark, back to the usual dim shadows from its own lights, and the horizon went quiet again. I sat there, heart kind of racing, trying to figure out what I just saw. No one was nearby. No boats or planes showed up. Nothing on the radio. I tried calling in on the marine channels, but it was just static, or the usual chatter from distant ships. I thought maybe I imagined the whole thing, but I knew I didn't. I stayed out there for a while after that, waiting for something else to happen, but the night just went back to normal. The stars were still out, the water calm, and the cargo ship was just sitting there like nothing had happened. On the way back to shore, I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting that light or the buzzing to come back. But it didn't. When I got home, I checked the weather reports, the maritime traffic updates, anything that might explain it. Nothing unusual. No emergency flares, no Coast Guard activity, no reports of strange lights or sounds. I told a couple of other fishermen, but they just shrugged it off. Probably a helicopter, one said, or some weird reflection. But none of it made sense. Helicopters don't shine steady blue lights like that from way up in the sky, and I would have heard the rotors. Reflections don't just focus perfectly on a single ship miles offshore. I still think about that night, about the light that came down from nowhere and the buzzing that filled my ears. I don't know what it was. Something about it felt wrong, like it didn't belong out there, like I caught a glimpse of something I wasn't supposed to see. I've gone back out to the same spot a few times since, but the night has been quiet. No lights, no buzzing, just the usual sound of water against the hull and the wind in the rigging. I don't know if I'll ever see that light again. Maybe it was a one-time thing. But every now and then, when I'm out there at night, I find myself scanning the sky, listening for that low hum, waiting to see if something comes back. I was chasing storms that night like I've done 100 times before. It was late spring, peak tornado season in the Midwest. I'd been out all day tracking a line of supercells that had been moving east across open farmland. Nothing too unusual at first. Normal stuff, really. But then things got weird. I wasn't alone. My buddy Dan was with me, driving the chase rig. I had my drone ready, and when the storm started to tighten up, I launched it to get some aerial shots. The plan was simple. Get some close footage of the funnel as it formed, then pull the drone back before it got too risky. Pretty standard. The sky was dark green and heavy with rain, the kind of color you only see before a big storm hits. We had about 10 miles to go before we caught up with the main cell, and the wind was already picking up, rattling the truck windows. Dan kept his eyes on the road, but I was focused on the drone feed, trying to find a good spot to hover it near the funnel. Then the funnel dropped. It was maybe a quarter-mile wide at the bottom, swirling violently, dirt and debris being sucked up like a vacuum. I got the drone as close as I dared, maybe a few hundred feet from the funnel's edge, broadcasting the live video to my tablet. That's when I noticed something strange. Right in the middle of the eye, where the air was supposed to be calm, there was a glowing sphere. It was about the size of a beach ball from what I could tell, just hanging there, perfectly still. It wasn't spinning or moving with the tornado. It stayed in one place as everything else around it spun and screamed. I blinked and rubbed my eyes, thinking maybe it was a reflection or some kind of lens flare, but the glow didn't flicker or change. It was a soft, pulsing light, not bright like a flashlight or flare, more like a steady glow from deep inside. I called out to Dan, "Hey, you seeing this?" He glanced over, eyes narrowing at the tablet. "What the hell? That's not supposed to be there." I kept the drone steady, zooming in on the sphere. The tornado was roaring so loud you could barely hear yourself think. The sky was swirling green and black, the world around that sphere spinning out of control. Then the drone feed started glitching. First the image got pixelated, then the signal cut out for a second before coming back. When it returned, the sphere was gone. Just like that. No warning, no flicker, nothing. The tornado was still there, still spinning hard, but the glowing ball had vanished. I tried to fly the drone closer to where the sphere had been, but the wind picked up so fast it was impossible to control. I had to pull it back and land it before it got destroyed. We drove off from the storm, Dan and I both quiet for a while. I kept replaying the footage over and over on my phone. The glow was clear. No trickery. No digital artifact. Later, I uploaded the video to a couple of storm-chasing forums, thinking maybe someone else saw something similar or could explain it. No one had. Some said it was ball lightning, but I know ball lightning, and this wasn't that. It didn't flicker, didn't move erratically, and it was too big and stable to be lightning. I checked weather reports and radar logs for any anomalies. Nothing showed up. No reports of anything strange from nearby towns or planes flying overhead. That night, I kept thinking about the sphere. It didn't make sense. How could something hover perfectly still inside a tornado's eye? The physics didn't add up. Tornadoes are violently chaotic, all wind and rotation, but that thing was calm, steady, almost deliberate. After a few days, I showed the footage to a couple of meteorologists I know. They were interested but skeptical. Could be a drone reflection or lens flare, one said. I disagreed. The glow didn't behave like a reflection. It stayed solid through different camera angles. I still can't explain it. The rest of the chase went as normal. Storms, rain, wind, the usual. But that moment, that glowing sphere in the tornado's eye felt like something else. Something not quite part of the storm. Something watching from the center of chaos. I've gone back to that footage more times than I care to admit. Still looking for answers, still waiting to find something that fits. But nothing has. It happened during my Thursday overnight shift about 3 years ago now. I was running the graveyard block at a small independent station outside Flagstaff. Midnight to 4 a.m., mostly pre-programmed stuff, low audience, very little live interaction. It was an easy gig, especially during the winter when the calls dropped off and the phone lines stayed mostly dead. That night started like any other. I got in around 11:30, checked the queue, queued up the playlists. Weather was clear but cold. I remember scraping frost off my windshield in the parking lot. We ran mostly classic rock and old school alt during the late shift, but I'd sneak in ambient stuff when the manager wasn't checking logs, just to keep myself from nodding off. The call came in a little after 2 a.m. I remember because I just faded out of a long instrumental track and was reaching for my coffee when the line blinked. I hadn't taken a single call all night. I figured it was a trucker or someone killing time, maybe looking for a request. I picked up and did the usual, "You're on the air, what can I play for you?" But there was no voice, just this high-pitched digital tone. Not static, not feedback. A weird, clean note, like something you'd hear from a modem if you're old enough to remember dial-up. I said hello again. Still nothing. Then the tone changed, dropped low and mechanical, like a deep hum with layers under it. Chirps clicking like automated signals or compressed data. It wasn't random either. It shifted in pulses, kind of rhythmic, but not in any pattern I could place. I took it off air and kept listening, just in case it was a prank, but it didn't sound like someone screwing around. It sounded too deliberate. Then, after maybe 30 seconds, the signal just stopped. Not a click or hang up, Just gone. Deadline. I figured I'd toss on another track and think it through, but when I looked back at the console, all the meters were frozen. Dead air. No signal to the tower. I hadn't touched anything except the phone. I tried resetting the stream, then the automation software. Nothing worked. The mic channel was still hot, but the board wasn't feeding anything to the transmitter. Even my monitor feed had gone silent. I called our tech guy, first time I'd ever had to wake him during my shift. He didn't pick up, so I left a message and started rebooting the hardware manually. Took everything down, waited, brought it back up in stages. The signal came back eventually, around 6 or 7 minutes later, but that window of dead air, it was total. No static, just black silence. I checked the logs. Nothing registered during that time. The system showed continuous play as if the playlist had kept going, but no audio reached the board. And the weird part, the last song before the call, the one I remember fading out of, was still queued like it had never actually played. I went back to the recording archive. We had a digital logger that saved the entire broadcast in 5-hour blocks. I pulled the file for that night, jumped to just before the call. The file played fine. My voice came through introducing the track. I said the station ID. Everything was normal. Then came the point where I picked up the phone, and then nothing. Just total silence for the next 6 minutes. No tones, no hum, not even my voice. It was like the mic had cut out the moment I answered. The waveform was flat. I skipped ahead and the audio returned mid-track like nothing had happened. That was the part that really got under my skin. It wasn't that something strange happened live that could be chalked up to a glitch or interference or whatever, but it was gone from the log too, like it never existed. Like my side of the interaction had been erased. I checked the incoming call list. We used a basic caller ID system that time-stamped every ring. The screen showed a call at 2:11 a.m., number withheld. Duration, 47 seconds. I called it back, got a fast, busy signal. The kind you hear when a line's been disconnected. I didn't talk about it the next day. I wrote up a generic note about a system hang and submitted it to the tech crew, but I didn't mention the tones or the signal drop. The manager didn't say anything, probably didn't even notice the gap. The rest of the week went normal, though I kept one eye on the phone console every night. Nothing else like that happened. Until the following Thursday. 2:08 a.m., the phone rang again. Same withheld number. I froze for a second, then answered without putting it on air. Same tone. High and steady at first, then it dropped into the layered mechanical hum. Almost identical to the first call, but this time it only lasted about 20 seconds. Then a click. An actual click, this time, and a voice. I don't know how else to say this, but it didn't sound human. Not robotic either. Just wrong. Like someone speaking through a filter they didn't fully understand. Words slurred into tones, clipped mid-syllable, no inflection. It said something like inbound, or at least that's what it sounded like, but with a weird delay between the syllables. Inbound. Then silence again. No broadcast cut this time. Everything stayed live. But my mic wasn't working for about a minute afterward. No one noticed, or at least no one called about it. I kept the music going and didn't take any more calls. I stayed in the booth until sunrise. I never got another call like that again. I kept watching the logs, kept recording backups of every shift. Nothing showed up. No more dropped signals. No more silence. Just that 1 week. 2 calls. Sometimes I wonder if it was some shortwave freak bouncing signals off the ionosphere, or some messed up satellite interference. But I don't buy that. Not with how quiet the line was. Not with the dead air. There's nothing like it in the archives anymore, either. I copied the original files to a USB drive, but a few months later when I tried to play them back, the audio had degraded. Just a solid buzz now, like electrical interference, you can't hear anything. But I remember what I heard. I remember the feeling of something pushing into the thing, like it was the signal. Like using the broadcast itself, not just piggybacking on it, like it came through the silence. I was driving the back roads on my delivery route that night, just like usual, the kind of roads nobody really takes except locals. It was late, maybe close to 11 p.m., and the whole stretch was quiet except for the hum of my truck engine and the occasional rustling of trees in the wind. I was making my last stop, a small convenience store just outside of town, way past the main highway. The road I was on was narrow, gravel covered, wet, and it curved through farmland and woods. I'd done this route 100 times, so nothing really stood out. I passed the old water tower maybe 10 minutes before my stop. It's this rusted metal thing that's been there forever, probably hasn't been used in years. I always kind of liked it in a weird way, kind of a landmark, even if it looked like it might fall over any day. I didn't expect to see anyone around it, especially that late. That night, though, something caught my eye as I rolled past it. At first, I thought it was a pile of garbage or maybe some deer crouched low, but then the shape moved. It was big, maybe 7 feet tall if I had to guess, but it was hunched down next to the base of the tower, kind of blending into the shadows. I slammed on the brakes, pulling off to the side so fast I almost fishtailed. I was staring at it, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It wasn't quite human, at least not in how it sat there. The proportions were off, long limbs folded in a way I don't think a person could sit. The whole thing looked wet or shiny, like its skin caught the moonlight in patches. I reached for my phone, thinking maybe I'd call someone, but the signal was weak out here. I took a couple of pictures, even though I knew they probably wouldn't come out. My hands were shaking more than I wanted to admit. Then it noticed me. It shifted, slowly, lifting its head, which was maybe a little too large and smooth, no hair. I swear it had no facial features. Not eyes, nose, or mouth I could make out. Just a blank, smooth surface reflecting the faint light. It stood up from its crouch, but instead of walking or running, it seemed to float upward, just drifting a few feet off the ground. The whole movement was silent, smooth, like it didn't belong to this world. I watched it rise past the tower's platform, higher and higher, until it vanished into the low clouds hanging over the fields. It didn't fly away like a bird or a plane, just disappeared. The clouds swallowed it whole. I sat there for a long time afterward, unable to move. I kept thinking I must be dreaming or hallucinating, but the air was cold and real. The truck was still running, the lights on, and my phone was dead from the weak signal. When I finally got moving again, I looked back once, but the spot was empty. The water tower looked the same as ever, except now it felt different, like it was guarding something I wasn't supposed to see. On the way back through town, I stopped at the gas station to charge my phone and get a coffee. I asked the clerk if anyone had mentioned anything strange around the old tower recently. He shrugged, said no, that area was just quiet. I tried to find the pictures later that night, but the files were corrupted, like they never existed. I didn't even bother showing them to anyone. I figured no one would believe me anyway. I still think about that shape sometimes, the way it moved, how it vanished into the clouds like it was part of the night itself. And the silence. It wasn't just quiet out there. It felt like the whole world had held its breath while I watched. I don't know what it was. Maybe it was just an animal I couldn't identify, or maybe something else. I just know it was real enough to make my hands shake for hours after. I never took that back road after dark again. I woke up to silence. That was the first thing I noticed. No wind through the trees, no birds, no rustling. Just that weird kind of heavy stillness that makes your ears feel like they're plugged. It had rained most of the night, hard enough that I woke up a few times to check my tent seams. I remember falling asleep again around 2 or 3 a.m., listening to the last of it tapping the rainfly. When I unzipped the tent that morning, something felt wrong immediately. I was expecting puddles, mud, maybe my stove knocked over if the wind picked up, but instead, everything was laid out in perfect rows. My backpack, sleeping bag, camp stove, food bag, water bottles, boots, clothes, even the spare batteries, all removed from the tent and arranged in straight lines on the ground outside, sorted by type. Nothing stacked, nothing missing, nothing damaged, just spread out and organized like someone was taking inventory. And it wasn't just grouped, it was spaced out, like someone had taken their time to make it neat. Food on one side, clothes folded on the other, small gear like lighters and compass in their own row. I stared at it for a long time, half asleep, trying to remember if I had done it myself, maybe during the night, half awake. But I never unzip my tent in the middle of the night when I'm solo. Never. especially not in the rain. The mud outside confirmed it rained hard. There were puddles and soft patches, and I should have seen my own prints leading out of the tent. Or prints from someone else, but the mud was smooth, no indentations, just a perfect wet surface, undisturbed. Even where the gear was sitting, the mud wasn't pushed down. The fabric on my sleeping bag looked dry. I picked it up. The underside was barely damp, like it had just been set down minutes ago. I sat back on my heels, looking around. My campsite was tucked in between a bend in the trail and a small slope. Trees to the west, creek to the east. I was at least 6 miles from the nearest access road. No other tents, no sounds of people. I checked my phone out of habit. No signal, obviously. The last time I'd seen another person was the afternoon before, a couple hiking the opposite direction. We said hi, that was it. I walked the perimeter of the site, did circles around where the gear had been laid out. Still no prints. I even checked under the clothes and gear again, like maybe the act of laying them down disturbed the mud. But there was nothing. I went back to the tent. My sleeping pad was still inside, zipped up. My notebook and headlamp were where I'd left them by my pillow. None of that had been touched. That's when it really started to sink in. Someone or something had to unzip the tent, unpack everything, lay it out, and zip the tent shut again, without leaving a single mark in the mud. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to boil water. I just sat on a log for a while watching the trees. Still no wind, no birds. The whole area felt not frozen exactly, but paused. I decided to pack everything back up. I didn't rush, but I didn't take my time either. I was planning to stay out 2 more nights, but something about that spot didn't feel right anymore. When I reached the trail, I stopped and looked back. The campsite looked completely normal again. Tent down, nothing left behind. Except for one thing, a single piece of gear I know I packed. A small pocket knife I keep clipped inside my pack's hip belt pocket was lying right at the edge of the clearing, lined up perfectly with the imaginary rows from earlier, pointing east. I hadn't used it on the trip yet, and I always check that pocket when I break camp. It was clean, no mud, no scratches, just sitting there like whoever had moved my stuff left it for me to find. The trail out was dead quiet. Not just animal quiet, but no wind, no bugs, no sound of leaves underfoot, like I was walking through a sealed room. I kept checking over my shoulder every few minutes, but I never saw anything. After about a mile, the sounds came back. Slowly. First some wind, then the distant sound of water, then birds. Like I was walking back into a world that had been on pause. When I finally hit the trailhead, my car was the only one in the lot. I sat in the driver's seat for a while before starting the engine. Not because I was scared, exactly. Just trying to figure out what to do with what happened. I never reported it. Didn't tell anyone for a long time. Nothing was technically missing. Nothing happened to me. But I stopped backpacking solo after that. I still go hiking, I still camp, but not alone. And not anywhere near that trail. I was up late one night, just like I usually am when I'm trying to get some photos of the stars. I've always been into amateur astronomy and night photography, so it's not unusual for me to be outside with my camera around midnight or later. This particular night, the sky was clear, really clear, and the stars looked perfect, so I set up my tripod in the backyard and started snapping away. Between midnight and about 2 in the morning, I took a bunch of pictures, just pointing the camera straight up or at different parts of the sky. It was the kind of calm, quiet night where the only sounds were a few distant cars and some rustling leaves. I felt completely alone out there, but in a good way. I like that kind of solitude. The next day, I loaded the photos onto my computer to check them out. Most looked exactly like you'd expect. Sharp stars, some constellations, a few satellites caught as tiny lines of light moving across the frame. But then I noticed something odd. In every photo taken between midnight and 2, there was this blurred triangular shape. It wasn't a sharp outline or a clear object, more like a smudge or a faint shadow, always somewhere near the center or just off to one side. It didn't move or change shape much, just there in every single shot. The color was strange too, sort of a dull gray with a faint glow around the edges, but nothing that looked like a lens flare or any typical camera artifact I've seen before. At first, I figured it had to be some kind of camera issue, maybe a dirty lens or a sensor problem. So I cleaned everything carefully, checked my settings, even took some test shots around sunset and during the day. No triangular shapes, just normal pictures. The night after, I set the camera up again, trying to catch the same part of the sky. I took photos at the same intervals between midnight and 2. When I looked at those pictures the next day, there it was again, the same blurry triangle, same size and shape in roughly the same spot. I started paying closer attention that night while I was outside. At first, I thought maybe I was imagining things, but the feeling of being watched crept in slowly. Nothing obvious, no one standing in the shadows or anything, but the air got heavy in the backyard, like something was hovering just out of sight. I noticed the neighborhood was unusually quiet. No barking dogs, no distant traffic noises, just a strange, almost unnatural stillness. I glanced around a few times, but didn't see anyone. My phone was on silent, so no distractions, just the occasional click of the camera shutter and the low hum of my laptop inside. Then I started hearing it. A faint mechanical clicking sound. Not loud, more like something buried deep in the background noise of the night, but definitely there. It was steady, rhythmic, almost like a clock ticking, but more metallic. I tried to locate it, but it didn't get any closer or farther. It just stayed, steady and low. The clicking lasted for maybe 15 minutes. I told myself it was probably just something normal, a machine somewhere, maybe a generator in a neighbor's yard or a distant radio tower. But still, it didn't quite fit with how quiet everything else was. After a while, I put the camera down and went inside. I checked the photos again on my computer, just to make sure the triangle was still showing up. It was, in every shot from that time window. On the third night, I decided to bring my binoculars out with me and just watch the sky for a while, without the camera. The triangle shape wasn't visible to the naked eye or through the binoculars. The stars were perfectly normal. No blinking lights, no moving shapes, nothing unusual. Still, I kept feeling like something was nearby, just out of reach, like an invisible presence hanging above the treetops, watching quietly. When I got back inside, I noticed something else weird. My phone had a few new notifications, messages from people I didn't know. Just random numbers, and the messages were strange. A few symbols I didn't recognize, like scrambled letters or code, nothing readable. I deleted them, thinking it was spam, but then one more came in. This one was different. It was an audio file, no text, just a short clip. I listened to it. At first, there was static, then the same faint clicking sound I'd heard outside. Then, very quietly, a whisper. It was my own voice. But the word it said was something I didn't know, something that didn't make sense. It wasn't any language I recognized, just a soft, breathy syllable. I checked my phone logs to see if I'd called or recorded anything at that time. Nothing. I hadn't spoken to anyone in hours, hadn't used any apps that could have recorded sound. I started wondering if I was losing track of time or dreaming while awake, but nothing else felt off. My memory of the night was clear, except for some brief moments where I couldn't say what I was doing. The next day, I went back through the photos, the messages, the sound clip, trying to connect dots. The triangle shape on the pictures, the clicking sound, the strange message on my phone, all tied together somehow, but without any clear reason. I thought about showing the photos to a few friends, but I hesitated. I don't know if they'd believe me or just think it was a camera glitch or some prank. After that, the strange messages stopped. The clicking sound didn't come back, and the triangle shape disappeared from my photos. But the feeling stayed, the sense that something was there, watching, just beyond what I could see. I still look up at the stars sometimes, camera ready, hoping to catch it again, but it hasn't shown up since. I was driving home late one Friday night, taking the usual route through that stretch of highway that runs between the city and the outskirts. It's a quiet road, mostly 2 lanes, lined with trees on either side, and only a handful of streetlights here and there. I liked this drive. It was peaceful, nothing hectic, just me and the road. I wasn't in any hurry, just heading home after a late shift. About halfway through the drive, just as I passed that old gas station that's been closed for years, I noticed the digital clock on the big roadside billboard flicker. It's one of those big flashy billboards with bright LED numbers showing the time and temperature. It usually works fine, except sometimes when the power glitches, the clock resets or goes blank for a second. No big deal, right? But that night, the clock wasn't just flickering once or twice. It kept resetting. The numbers would show the time for a moment, then jump back to 12, then start counting up again. The glitching happened like clockwork, and every time the clock reset, I caught this bright light flashing across the sky just above the treetops nearby. At first, I thought it might be a plane or a meteor. The light moved fast, a sharp streak, almost too fast to track with my eyes. It wasn't one of those slow-moving satellites or regular airplanes with blinking red and green lights. It was bright white, clean and sharp, and just as sudden as it appeared, it was gone. The weird part was the billboard clock glitching exactly every time the light crossed overhead. The numbers would reset at the same moment, like the light triggered it somehow. I slowed down and watched closely. The clock would run for maybe 30 seconds, then bam, reset to 12, right as the light zipped past. I pulled off to the shoulder to get a better look. The night was quiet except for the faint hum of the highway. I stepped out of the car and stared up. The stars were clear, nothing out of the ordinary, but every minute or so that same bright flash would streak across the sky. I tried to call someone, but my phone showed no signal. Weird for being this close to town. I flipped through my messages and photos. Everything was fine, but the clock kept glitching. I felt a little uneasy, like something wasn't right. After a few minutes, I noticed something else. The trees near the billboard seemed darker than the rest, like they were absorbing the light or something. I stared at them, but couldn't really make out any shapes or movement, just darkness. The clock reset again, and the light flashed across the sky. This time, I caught a faint hum, like a low-frequency vibration you feel more than hear. It wasn't loud, but it was enough to make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. I sat back in the car, trying to shake off the feeling. I told myself it was just some electrical interference messing with the billboard. Maybe a transformer nearby was going bad, and the light was something completely unrelated. Then the power on the billboard went out completely. The whole display went dark. The trees were pitch black, and that humming sound grew a little louder. I didn't hear any other cars, even though it was a weekend night when there's usually a few vehicles on the road. After maybe a minute of silence and darkness, the billboard lights came back on, but the clock was frozen, stuck at 12, and wouldn't change. I started the car and pulled back onto the road, glancing up at the sky as I went. The flashes stopped. No more bright streaks, no more humming. I tried my phone again. Signal was back. The time and date corrected themselves. The billboard clock finally ticked forward again, slowly counting the seconds as if nothing had happened. I don't know how long I'd been standing there or what exactly I'd seen. The whole thing lasted maybe 20 minutes. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting the flashes to start again or for something else to show up in the trees. But nothing did. When I got home, I checked the local news and weather stations, but there was no mention of anything unusual in the area. No storms, no electrical outages, nothing. I haven't gone back to that spot since, but I drive that road every now and then. Sometimes I look at the billboard clock as I pass. It works fine now, just like it's supposed to. Still, every once in a while I swear I see a faint flicker or feel that same low hum for a second, like it's waiting to come back. It happened on a Saturday in late October, a few years ago. My girlfriend and I were driving through a mountain pass in northern Utah, heading back from visiting her mom. It was just after 6 p.m., starting to get dark, and we figured we'd take the scenic route through the Wasatch instead of the interstate. Not the smartest choice in hindsight. We weren't in a rush. It was supposed to be a 2-hour drive, give or take. We had snacks, good weather, and my car had just been serviced the week before. Everything felt normal. About an hour in, somewhere past a small town called Oak Ridge, the road got twistier and more narrow. The kind of route where there's no shoulder, just a drop on one side and a wall of trees on the other. Still paved, but definitely not a highway. There weren't any other cars around, but that didn't seem weird at the time. We were talking about something stupid, I think a show we'd been watching, and then my girlfriend tried to change the song. That's when she noticed the phone had no signal. I glanced at mine too. No bars, no LTE, no 1X, just nothing. The GPS had stopped updating too. It still showed our little blue dot moving, but the map tiles weren't loading anymore. Like it got stuck. That wasn't too strange. There's always dead zones in the mountains. I figured we'd reconnect in a few minutes. But then she tried to put on the radio instead, and it was just static. Every station. She went through the whole dial. Not even a hint of sound, just white noise. I remember feeling a little annoyed, not scared. I thought maybe we'd taken a wrong turn or something. But the road was still paved, still had signs. We passed a green mile marker a few minutes later, something like mile 14, but no highway name. It started getting colder, too. I noticed it when I turned down the fan and felt a weird draft around my legs, like the air inside the car wasn't matching the heater. My girlfriend zipped up her hoodie and pulled her sleeves over her hands, and I remember making a joke about how she was always cold. She didn't laugh. The road narrowed again, enough that I slowed down to maybe 25. No guardrails, just tight curves and black trees pressing in close on both sides. Our headlights were the only thing visible. No stars, no moon, just complete darkness outside the beam. We drove like that for a while. I'm not sure how long. I remember starting to feel weirdly tired. Not sleepy exactly, just dulled. Like the hum of the tires and the heater and the dark outside was all starting to blend together. I realized at one point I hadn't blinked in a while. My eyes were dry. My girlfriend wasn't saying anything either. She was just staring straight ahead. Then the headlights caught something up ahead. It looked like a curve sign at first, those yellow arrow ones, but when we got closer, it wasn't reflective, just flat, dull metal, leaning at a weird angle, like it had been bent and never fixed. There weren't any markings on it, no words, just a blank gray sign half covered in rust. And right after we passed it, there was this loud thump under the car. Not like we hit something, more like something hit us. Just once, enough that it jolted us. I stopped the car. My girlfriend looked at me and said, "What was that?" I got out with my phone flashlight and checked. Tires were fine, nothing leaking. I even got down and looked under the front bumper. No dents, no branches or rocks, nothing. When I got back in, she asked if we should turn around. I said no. I didn't want to backtrack through all that again in the dark, and I really thought we were close to getting out of the hills, so I kept driving. That's when things started feeling wrong. The road didn't change. At all. Same curve, same angle, same trees. We passed another mile marker, but it said mile 14 again. I thought maybe I imagined that until we passed the weird bent sign again. And then the thump. Same exact spot, same sound. I braked hard this time. My girlfriend gasped and looked at me like she was about to panic. I didn't even check the car again. I just stared out the windshield, trying to make sense of it. We couldn't be looping. That's not how roads work. There weren't any turnoffs, no places to circle back, just a straight road through the mountains. We sat there for maybe a minute. I had my foot on the brake the whole time, and my hands were sweating. I could feel my heartbeat in my neck. She was whispering something, but I don't think it was words, just a kind of muttering. Then, all at once, the radio came back. Loud, crackling music blasted out, some classic rock station, mid-song. The GPS blinked back to life and reloaded our route. We both jumped like we'd been shocked. I looked at the map and saw that we were suddenly just outside a town called Pine Grove. Here's the thing. Pine Grove was at least 30 miles past where I thought we were. There's no way we could have gotten there in that time. It was like we skipped a whole chunk of road. I pulled over immediately, right near a small gas station, and checked the mileage. We'd gone almost 60 miles since Oak Ridge, but the time didn't match. We'd only been driving for about 90 minutes total. That stretch of mountain road should have taken us twice as long at the speed we were going. And neither of us remembered driving it. No scenery, no curves, no signs, nothing. We sat there in the parking lot for a long time. I think I refueled just to do something with my hands. My girlfriend didn't say anything for a while, and when she finally did, all she said was, "Can we take the highway back next time?" We never talked about it again, not in detail. I still have no idea what happened. I even drove that same route again months later during the day. I recognized the first half of the drive up through Oak Ridge, But after that, nothing looked familiar. No rusted sign, no weird curves, and I never saw another mile 14 marker. There were no thumps under the car that time, no static on the radio, but I still don't like driving through the mountains anymore. I was hiking alone in Central Oregon last summer, not too far from Sisters. I'd done that trail a few times before, but this time I decided to push deeper off the main loop just to see what was out there. I had my GPS watch, a paper map, and enough water and food for the day. It wasn't supposed to be anything big, just a long afternoon hike and back to my truck before dark. Around noon, I left the marked trail. There was a dry creek bed that ran east, and I figured I'd follow it for a bit before looping back. It was quiet, like unusually quiet. I didn't see any birds, and the wind had totally died. The only sound was my boots on the gravel and the occasional creak of the trees. About 45 minutes in, I stopped to eat and check my bearings. Everything seemed normal. My watch said I was about 3.5 miles from the trailhead, which made sense. I hadn't seen any other hikers since morning. No litter, no cairns, no blazes, just untouched forest. I kept going maybe another half hour, and that's when I saw it. At first I thought it was just a strange-looking tree. From a distance it looked like it had been struck by lightning or maybe damaged by snow because the shape was all wrong. But as I got closer I realized it wasn't broken. It was deliberate. Every single branch from the trunk all the way up had been bent sharply upward at a right angle. Not snapped or hanging, bent cleanly like pipe, and they were all pointing straight up toward the sky. It didn't look natural. The branches weren't twisted or jagged, just this perfect 90-degree bend like they'd been softened and reshaped. Even the small ones, the twigs, every one of them was bent upward. No leaves on the tree either, but it was green beneath the bark, alive. I stood there staring at it for a long time, trying to figure out what I was looking at. I even walked around it a few times, looking for scorch marks or tool damage. Nothing. The bark wasn't stripped. No saw cuts, no evidence of people messing with it. Then I looked up. There was a faint hum in the air. Not loud, more like the feeling of sound than actual sound. Like when a big truck idles far off in the distance, but there's no engine noise, just pressure. I turned off my watch, thinking maybe it was buzzing, but it wasn't that. I took a few steps back and checked my phone, thinking I'd take a picture. That's when I noticed I had no service, not even emergency SOS, which didn't make sense because I had full bars earlier and hadn't gone that far. I tried to take a photo anyway, but the camera app glitched and froze. The screen stayed black and wouldn't respond. I had to force restart it, and even then it took forever to come back on. When it finally did, the battery had dropped from 82% to 19%. I hadn't used it at all since checking the map. I backed away from the tree, but the hum stayed with me. I looked around, trying to see if there was something else nearby. Power lines, a transformer, a plane overhead, but there was nothing. The sky was clear, no wind. The sun felt a little dim, though, like there was something between me and it, even though I couldn't see anything. I didn't want to be there anymore. I started heading back toward the creek bed, moving fast but trying not to panic. I kept checking over my shoulder, even though I didn't see or hear anything behind me. It just felt wrong, like the air was heavy. I passed a few trees that looked like they'd been burned long ago, black trunks, no underbrush, and realized I hadn't noticed them on the way in. That threw me off. I pulled out the map and tried to reorient myself, but the creek wasn't where I thought it should be. I walked another 10 minutes and never found it. Just more trees, all starting to look the same. At some point I stopped walking and just stood still, listening. Nothing. No birds, no bugs, no planes, just that low, pressure-like hum. And then it stopped, like someone hit a switch. The sudden silence was even worse. I decided to follow the slope downhill, figuring it would eventually lead to a road or the main trail. I kept my compass out, but the needle kept twitching slightly, like it couldn't settle on north. Not spinning wildly, just enough to notice. That's when I heard something above me. It wasn't a plane. It didn't have that Doppler shift or engine sound. It was more like a low whoosh, like a big piece of fabric being dragged slowly through the air. I looked up and didn't see anything. The sky was still clear, but the shadows on the ground didn't match. The light flickered for a few seconds like something was moving between the sun and the trees, but nothing was there. I crouched down and waited. I didn't move for a long time, probably 15, 20 minutes. Eventually the light went back to normal. The warmth returned. Birds started chirping again, one at a time. I stood up and picked a direction. I didn't even try to find the trail at that point. I just wanted something, a road, a sign, a fence. After about an hour of hiking without stopping, I crossed a dirt path with tire tracks and followed it west. That finally led to a Forest Service road, and from there I was able to get a signal and call a friend. When I checked my watch, it said it was 5:23 p.m. I'd only planned to be out for about 5 hours, but the GPS log showed a 4-hour gap with no movement, just a single point, like I'd stood still the entire time. I don't remember stopping for more than a few minutes. I drove home that night and didn't tell anyone. Not right away. I tried to go back a few weeks later with a buddy, but we couldn't find the tree. We searched for hours and didn't even see the burned trunks I'd passed. The forest felt different, like it had shifted somehow. I still have the GPS track from my watch. It shows that weird static point way off the main trail, just sitting there like I was standing still for 4 hours. I was cleaning out my basement last winter and found this old portable hard drive tucked in a storage bin. The label just said ATC Backup 2002-2007, and I knew right away what it was. I used to be an air traffic controller out of the regional center just outside Wichita. I did that for 27 years before I retired. Anyway, back then we had a policy where controllers could save radar playback logs for training or error review, and I used to copy interesting ones to my personal drive sometimes. Stuff like close calls, odd traffic patterns, that sort of thing. All from unclassified commercial routes. Nothing sensitive. I plugged the drive in that night, mostly out of nostalgia. I opened a few logs in our old playback viewer, and it was exactly how I remembered. Little green and yellow blips scooting across the screen, each tagged with altitude, squawk code, call sign if it was on file. It brought me back. There was one file named unassigned score 0429 2005 0344Z. That's how the system labeled unsaved autologs. Random captures it saved when something flagged a warning but didn't meet criteria for an incident report. Most of those were garbage, so I almost skipped it, but for some reason I opened it. The display loaded to a wide-angle view centered roughly southwest of Wichita. The timestamp showed April 29th, 2005 at 3:44 Zulu, which would have been about 10:44 p.m. local time, middle of a routine night shift. At first, I didn't see anything unusual, just one regional jet climbing through FL 220 heading west. No weather returns, no restricted airspace. But about 20 seconds into the playback, a tag blinked on out of nowhere at the top of the screen. FL 700. That's 70,000 feet. We don't track anything at that altitude, just not in that airspace. Even the high-flying military platforms like U-2s are rare, and when they come through, they're well coordinated with squawk codes and escort spacing. This thing had no transponder return, just a skin paint, meaning the radar caught a solid object with no identifying info. I zoomed in and froze it. The return wasn't strong, but it was consistent. It showed up on 3 sweeps in a row, which meant it wasn't a glitch, and it didn't move. It just hovered there. I looked at the location again, and that's when it got weird. It was directly over the neighborhood where I lived at the time. I pulled up a map and confirmed it. The blip sat just east of Clearwater, Kansas, right above the house we'd lived in for 12 years. I remember because we moved out the next year. It hovered at 70,000 feet, stationary, for about 14 seconds. Then, without any acceleration curve or directional change, it disappeared. No drift, no fade, just gone between one sweep and the next. Now that by itself would be strange enough. But then I remembered something. That same night back in 2005, I had trouble sleeping. It was a Thursday. I was off that day, and I remember being up late. Our son was in high school then, and he'd just started sneaking out sometimes. I thought I heard the back gate creak, so I got up and looked out the kitchen window. I didn't see him, but I do remember noticing a weird buzzing in the house. like an electrical hum but uneven. It would fade in and out every few seconds. I actually walked around trying to find the source, checked the fridge, the thermostat, even the breaker box. Nothing. I went back to bed, and by the time I woke up, I'd forgotten about it. Seeing that radar blip years later brought the whole thing back. I replayed the log about a dozen times, tried different filters, different playback speeds. The return was always the same, barely there, but clear. Altitude held at FL 700 and position never changed. It didn't match any aircraft profile. There were no scheduled flights at that level, and the FAA wouldn't have authorized anything over civilian airspace without coordination. I even checked the original incident database, using the log ID. No notes, no follow-up. Whatever flagged the radar that night never made it into any formal report. I showed the playback to an old coworker who I still talk to now and then. He's one of the guys who taught me when I was new. He watched it twice, didn't say much, then asked where the return came from. I told him. He looked at me for a second, then said, "You sure that isn't just a reflection from a stray weather balloon or something?" I told him the system filters for those. He nodded, then closed the file and said, "Probably nothing." And that was that. I didn't push it. I've learned not to, especially with people who've been in that chair. You see enough strange things and you just start letting some of them slide off you. But here's the part that bugs me. After I found that log, I started going through the rest of the files. Out of maybe 100, I found 3 more with blips like that, always at exactly 70,000 feet, always skin paints, always no movement. And each time, the location was somewhere I'd lived or stayed for more than a few days. Once near my brother's cabin in Arkansas, once near a hotel I used to crash in when I worked doubles. Once over an old rental house we left in the 90s. They weren't all on the same day or even the same year, just scattered. But every one of them followed the same pattern. Brief return, exact altitude, no ID, no motion. I checked the radar logs from other stations, ones that overlapped our airspace, and didn't find anything. Whatever these returns were, they only ever showed up on the terminal radar in our sector. I haven't mentioned this to my family. I'm not sure what I'd even say. There's nothing to explain, and I don't have a theory. I still have the files. I don't know what to do with them, if anything. Most days I don't even think about it, but I haven't erased them either. I was flying a routine training run out over the desert, just me and my co-pilot in the cockpit. We'd taken off around dusk with clear skies and a smooth ride. Nothing unusual, just the usual checklists and radio chatter. The kind of flight you do 100 times and expect to be boring. About halfway through the trip, I noticed these lights off in the distance, way out near the horizon. At first, I thought it was some other plane or maybe a group of helicopters flying formation. But the desert out there doesn't see much traffic after dark, and the way those lights move didn't fit anything normal. I pointed them out to my co-pilot. "You see that?" I asked. He looked where I was pointing and shrugged. The lights were small but distinct, like 5 or 6 dots in a line, spread out evenly, moving steadily. What caught my attention was how perfectly they kept pace with us. As we climbed, the lights climbed. When we accelerated, they matched speed exactly, keeping the same distance, maybe 3 or 4 miles behind us. It was strange enough that I pulled up the binoculars to get a better look. The formation held steady, silent out there in the darkening sky. No blinking navigation lights, no flashing strobes, just solid, constant points of light. Nothing about them looked like anything I'd ever seen on a radar or any training manual. I mentioned it on the radio just to see if anyone else picked it up, but no one answered. No warnings, no chatter about traffic, just silence. After a while, the lights seemed almost hypnotic. They didn't change formation or direction, just followed. It was like they were glued to us, no matter what maneuvers we tried. I felt a weird tension building, like I was being watched but couldn't look away. Then my co-pilot pulled out his own binoculars and scanned the spot where the lights were. He stared for a good 30 seconds, then shook his head. "I don't see anything," he said flatly. I blinked, confused. The lights were still there for me, steady and clear. I looked again, this time with my naked eye. The lights had vanished, just gone, as if they'd never been there. I asked him to look again, but he just stared into the empty sky. No glow, no points of light, nothing. I felt a cold rush. How could I be seeing something he couldn't? We kept circling, looking back to where they'd been, but there was nothing. No other aircraft on the radar, no sound, no evidence. Later, during the debrief, I tried to describe it, but it sounded crazy even to me. My co-pilot didn't mention anything. I wondered if he had just been tired or had some kind of lapse. But I kept thinking about those lights, how they followed us so precisely, then disappeared the moment he looked. I still can't explain what it was. It wasn't a glitch, not a trick of the eye, at least not for me. Something out there matched us perfectly, then just vanished when it was noticed. I flew other missions after that, but I never saw anything like it again. My son started talking about it in early March. He's 6, and we've never had any real issues with nightmares or anything like that. He sleeps through the night. The night doesn't ask to leave lights on. He's always been really steady that way. So I paid attention when he suddenly started getting nervous about bedtime. The first time he mentioned it, I was tucking him in, and he asked me to close his curtains. They were usually open a little so the moonlight could come in. He liked that. But this time, he said, "Can you close them all the way? I don't want it to see me tonight." I paused and asked what he meant by it, and he just pointed toward the window and said, "The shape that follows the moon." His tone wasn't dramatic or scared, just matter of fact, like he was saying something totally normal. I didn't press. I figured it was something he saw in a cartoon, or maybe he misunderstood something from school. I told him there was nothing to worry about and closed the curtains, just to make him feel better. But the next few nights he kept asking, "Did you close them all the way? Don't let it see in." And then one night, this must have been maybe a week after that first time, I asked him directly what he was seeing. He said it was a bright shape, kind of like the moon, but sharper, and that it moved when the moon moved. I asked him what he meant by sharper. He said it has corners, like a triangle or a tooth, which was weird enough on its own, but the way he said it, again, just plain and calm, made it stick in my head. That night I checked outside after he went to bed. Nothing. Sky was clear. Full moon, stars. No weird lights, no reflections, no sounds. Our street is quiet, cul-de-sac, no through traffic. I even walked down the block to see if anything looked off from another angle. All normal. Then the next night, I was doing dishes after he went to bed, and I saw him standing in the hallway near the window. I called to him. He didn't answer. I dried my hands and walked over, and he was just staring out through a gap in the curtain. His face was blank, but he looked like he was concentrating. I asked what he was doing, and he said, "It's back, but it's not moving tonight." I looked out with him. I didn't see anything, just the moon over the neighbor's house and some light cloud cover. But then, just for a second, I saw something move. I don't know how to describe it exactly. It was like a glint, not a light, but a brightness in a specific shape. Not round, more like a bent corner. It was high up, not too far from the moon, and it didn't blink or shift like a plane or satellite. It was just there. Then it was gone. I asked him if that's what he meant. He nodded. "It hides when you see it," he said. That's when it stopped feeling like a kid's imagination. The next day, I went through his room, wondering if maybe the reflection from something in the house, some object or sticker or toy that might throw light at night. Nothing. I even laid in his bed at night and opened the curtains to try and see what he might be seeing. Again, nothing. Sky was empty, but he kept talking about it. Never scared, just watchful. One morning, he told me, "It got closer last night. It looked like it wanted to come down." I asked him how he knew that, and he said because the moon moved fast and it followed. That really got to me. He had no way of knowing the moon doesn't actually move in that way, not from his point of view. He didn't say it rose or set, he said it moved fast. And he wasn't smiling or trying to spook me, he just said it while he was brushing his teeth. I started making sure his window was fully shut and locked. No reason, just felt like I should. I even set up one of those cheap wildlife cameras in his room, pointing toward the window. Motion activated. I didn't tell him. I just wanted to see if I could catch headlights or animal something that might explain it. For 3 nights, nothing. Then on the 4th, The camera triggered 3 times between 2 and 2:10 a.m. I checked the footage. The first 2 clips were nothing, just the window and the edge of his bed. No movement, no sound. The third clip, I don't know. The image glitched. It wasn't like a tech error. It was like a flash of light hit the lens, but only on one side. Like someone had a flashlight just barely in frame, but from above outside the window. It lasted half a second, and then it was normal again. I checked outside in the morning. No footprints, no signs of animals. The window screen was fine, no damage. The weirdest part was that I couldn't stop thinking about that flash. It had the same color as the shape I thought I saw the night I stood with him. Not white, more silvery. Like bright metal in sunlight, except it was the middle of the night. I didn't tell him about the camera. I just started keeping his curtains closed all the time. He didn't argue. Then about a week later, things stopped. No more comments, no more watching the window. He started sleeping in again, stopped asking if I'd closed the curtains. I waited a couple days, then finally asked if he still saw the shape. He said no, it found someone else. I asked what he meant. He just shrugged and said, "It was looking. It's not looking here now." That was it. I took down the camera and went back to normal routines. But a few days after that conversation, I checked the footage one last time. Nothing new, but I noticed something I hadn't before. The glitch in that last clip? It wasn't just light. There was a shadow behind it. Not on the window, on the floor. For maybe 2 frames, there was a triangle-shaped shadow stretching across the carpet, pointing toward his bed. It didn't move, just appeared, then vanished. I deleted the clip. I was walking my dog around the back field behind my house when it happened. This was late August, a little after 9 p.m., so it was already dark out, but still warm. I live in a rural area in central Kentucky. No streetlights out here, no traffic sounds, just crickets and tree frogs and the occasional owl. I walk that same loop almost every night. The dog knows the path so well she barely needs a leash. We'd made it to the far edge of the field by the old broken fence where the tree line starts when I saw the flash. It was quick, maybe a second, maybe less, but it lit up the whole sky like lightning. Only it wasn't lightning. There were no clouds, no storm, and the light didn't spread from a single spot. It swept across the sky in a straight line, fast from north to south, like a shooting star but bright white, almost bluish and dead silent. The weird part, and I noticed it right away, was that everything went quiet. Completely. No bugs, no night birds. The dog stopped walking. She turned around and sat down right at my feet, staring at the sky. I thought maybe a coyote or something was nearby, but it wasn't that kind of quiet. It was wrong, like the air itself had muted. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds just listening. It was like being underwater. I couldn't even hear my own footsteps when I shifted my weight. The dog didn't bark or growl. She just sat there like she was waiting. Then, slowly, the normal sounds started coming back. First, a single cricket, then the frogs, then a whip-poor-will way off in the distance. Within a minute or two, everything sounded normal again. But the dog didn't move. I had to call her 3 times before she got up. I thought maybe it was a satellite or a meteor, but I've seen plenty of those. I've never seen one light up the entire sky like that. And I've never had the whole woods go silent afterward. We finished the walk early and went inside. I didn't tell my wife about it. It didn't seem worth mentioning. Just one of those odd little moments. But the next night, when I went out again around the same time, I noticed something. There were no insects. None. No cricket sounds, no cicadas, no frogs down by the creek. The sky was clear, stars out, warm air like the night before, but dead quiet. The dog acted normal for the first few minutes, but once we reached the same stretch of fence line, she stopped again. This time she didn't sit. She turned around on her own and started walking back toward the house, tail low. I followed her, didn't push it. As soon as we got back to the porch, the sound came back, slowly, like someone turning up a dial. I just stood there trying to figure out if I was imagining it. I didn't go back out that night. The next day, I walked the same loop around 6 p.m. before sunset. I brought a flashlight just in case, but I wanted to see if it felt normal during the daytime. It did. Birds were active. Bugs were everywhere. No weird silence. Then I looked up. There was something white caught high in the branches of one of the sycamores along the edge of the trail. It looked like fabric at first, like a plastic grocery bag that'd blown up there, but it wasn't moving at all, and there was no wind. I threw a stick at the branch, and it didn't budge. It looked almost stuck to the wood. I climbed the fence to get closer, but once I got underneath, I couldn't see it anymore. I circled the tree. Nothing. I don't know if it fell or what, but it was gone. That night, I didn't take the usual route. I just let the dog out in the backyard for a bit and stayed on the porch. She came back quickly and waited at the door to be let in, which wasn't like her. She usually loves being out there. A couple nights later, I think it was a Monday, I had trouble sleeping. Around 1:30 a.m., I got up and went to the kitchen to get a drink. From the window over the sink, I can see out to the far edge of the field, just before the woods, and I saw a light there. Not moving, just hovering. Bright white, maybe the size of a beach ball, hard to say from that distance. It was just there above the grass, maybe 8 or 9 feet off the ground. No beam, no flickering, just steady. I turned off the kitchen light so I could see better. It stayed there. I watched it for maybe a minute, then went to get my binoculars from the closet. By the time I got back, it was gone. No sound. Nothing unusual on the wind. Just darkness again. I walked the field the next morning. I didn't see anything at first, but when I reached the spot where I thought the light had been, I noticed a ring of flattened grass. Not burned, not dead, just flattened in a circle maybe 6 feet across. No footsteps, no tire tracks. I didn't tell anyone about that either. That weekend, I drove into town to pick up some fencing materials and ended up talking with the guy at the feed store, a local named Tom who's lived here all his life. We talk about weather, gardening, usual stuff. I asked, just casually, if anyone around had seen anything strange in the sky lately. He went quiet for a second, then said, "You mean out by the timber line?" That caught me off guard. I hadn't mentioned where. I said, "Yeah, I guess so." He just nodded, didn't say anything else. I didn't push it. That night, I decided to sit outside on the porch again and just listen. The dog stayed next to me the whole time. Around 9:20, the crickets all stopped. Not slowly, all at once, like a switch flipped. The silence lasted maybe a minute, then came back just as suddenly. No lights in the sky that time. Nothing moved, but the dog was shaking. I haven't walked that far out since then. I stick to the yard, maybe the start of the trail, but I don't go back to that fence line. I still hear the frogs and the bugs most nights, and the stars are still out. But every now and then, everything just stops, only for a minute or two, then it comes back. But it's always after dark, always in that same direction, and always when I'm alone.